going live. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself.
We choose to create like our Creator. These creations are in progress, but we are perfect, eternal, changeless, here now, at peace. A very wonderfully wise man once told us that he has a dream where one day we can all sit together in peace. But rest assured, I assure you, this is not a dream. This is a vision of reality, of eternity. This is truth. We are here in peace, all of us together. There is no difference in who we essentially are. We are at peace here. And if we're not at peace, it's just a choice away. For peace is here now, whether we recognize it as such or not. So do you want peace? Because it's given, it's here, presented for you in each moment eternally now. Thank you for accepting this peace and thus sharing it. Thank you for your pivotal role in life's unfolding. And after all this time, we are still here now. Peace is not a counterculture. Peace allows counter to culture. Peace is a culture, simply a way of being. By asking, we're co-creating. My being cannot be taken away by your being. You're adding, interweaving. Your being cannot be taken away by my being. They're rising, realizing. Their being cannot be taken away by our being. We're rising, self-realizing. Our being cannot be taken away by our being. Peace is achieved the moment we choose choose to be at peace with the fact that external circumstance is a map, an internal process projected from lack. Wait a minute, step back. How do we have peace when we're under attack? Quite simply, we choose peace. Hold up, what are you saying? This is life or death that you're playing. That's one choice. I choose peace. Peace is a choice, a mental invoice. It represents perception embedded with joy. The senses show us direct message reflection, the mirror image of self, our most holy connection. Would you like to assess your state of peace? Look about and see what you perceive. Here now need not be changed but extended. Contentment with present can be never ended. Incidentally, let's address the mental beliefs, the ones that cloud our ascent to peace. We're sent in peace, not in conflict. Being is guaranteed, no thing can stop it. God is by definition all of ourself. To think that God is separate from us is hell, but hell is but a mental state, a choice that we can recreate. So set it straight, shed the weight, and meditate, because by asking, we're co-creating. My being cannot be taken away by your being. You're adding, interweaving. Your being cannot be taken away by my being. They're rising, realizing. Their being cannot be taken away by our being. We're rising, self-realizing. Our being cannot be taken away by our being. So let's be in peace. We don't need to wait. We don't need to force external circumstance. We don't need to make demands of change. We simply must be at peace. It's a choice to choose now. Eternally now. Be at peace. Make that choice. Be at peace. And watch your external circumstance unfold.
Welcome, everyone, to Global Oneness Day 2019. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities Team. I'd like to thank you so much for being with us for this exciting 10th anniversary Global Oneness Day program. Global Oneness Day has become our Earth Day for an awakened humanity. In celebration of our 10th anniversary, we are broadcasting 6 straight days today, Saturday, October 19th through Thursday, October 24th, the official Global Oneness Day. The programs will be broadcast from 9 a.m. to 12 noon Pacific each day. When you register on the globalonenesssummit.org website, you can participate for free And you'll receive free viewing links if you miss the live broadcast. That's globalonenesssummit.org. This year, we're breaking Global Oneness Day into 6 days to make the summit more accessible and I'll call it consumable. You don't have to watch for 13 hours straight anymore. Hooray. There are 21 panels, all with unique themes relating to our oneness with the divine, each other, and all of life. The panels are hosted by a diverse set of leaders, each featuring important guests. We are super excited about Global Oneness Day 2019. Humanities team convened the very first Global Oneness Day on October 24th, 2010. We had about 1,000 people with us on a dedicated conference call line. It's grown over the years into this almost week-long program of activism and celebration that now involves over 100,000 people participating from all over the world. Humanities team works year-round to plan and host Global Oneness Day. Now, I'd like to welcome my special guest to this opening ceremony, Neale Donald Walsch, the author of the Conversations with God book series, and Karen Noe, the author of We Consciousness. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Neale and Karen.
Thank you very much, Steve. Lovely to be here, especially lovely to be here with Karen.
All right.
So happy to be here, too.
Wonderful to have you here with us. And So we're going to talk, of course, about our oneness with the divine, each other, and all of life, and the invitation to live into the unity of all of life. And Neale, if I can come to you first, what does the Conversations with God series say about the statement, we are all one, and why is this important?
Well, it tells us, number one, let me make something clear. It was the very first message I received in 3,000 pages of the Conversations with God dialogue. I recall it vividly. I think it's on page 2 or page 3 of book 1 of 9 books, covering over 3,000 pages. And after I was told that we are all one, it was made very clear to me in the dialogue that this is the single most important message that Conversations with God has to bring us. And that, in fact, to make the point very clear, God said, you really don't need anything else. You don't need to hear anything else. Because if you decided to actually step into and live the idea that we are all one, if you decided to embrace that notion and demonstrate it as part of your lived reality, you would have to worry about nothing else, because everything else largely would take care of itself, because you would then suddenly be taking care of yourself, all other people you know, all the people you don't know, the whole of humanity, and in fact the earth on which we reside. You'd be taking care of all of it just in the same way that you take care of yourself. Now, for some people, that's not even saying very much, because we don't take that good care of ourselves. So I think that what I learned from Conversations with God is that we are all one becomes powerfully important, both to us individually and to us as a collective, because it invites us to take care of ourselves, of all of ourselves, and to do so with love, compassion, understanding, awareness, forgiveness, and a sense of who we really are, a sense of our divine nature. So when we say we are all one, what we're really saying, and this is what's incredibly important and incredibly powerful, is that not just that we're one with each other, or with the birds in the sky, or the fish in the sea, or even with the planet. That's all true, but it says much more than that. What God is telling us with the statement, we are all one, is that we are one with everything, and that includes the aspect of life that we call divinity, or God itself. We are told in Conversations with God that we are all individuations of divinity, or, if you please, singularizations of the singularity. If there was any more important message for humanity to receive at this point in time, I can't imagine what it would be. So I've been traveling around the world and so happy to take part in this Global Oneness Day celebration to help everyone understand that if we could, in fact, reduce all of the messages of the Conversations with God books, which have reached something like 15 million people in 37 languages, if we could reduce those messages to one sentence, it would be that we are all one. And if we could embrace that notion and put it into our life as a lived reality, everything would change virtually overnight, globally and locally, even in your own house. So I invite you all to try it and live into it and see what that does for you, and see if we can learn how that can be done. Is it possible? Is it humanly possible? Karen knows all about that, because she's written some wonderful, wonderful material on that very subject.
Ooh, let's breathe into that here for a moment. Take a couple of conscious breaths into what Neale just shared. Beautiful, and of course true. Neale, thank you.
Oh, gosh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So Karen, I'm going to come over to you. What does, and Karen's the author, as I mentioned in the introduction, of We Consciousness and other books. And so Karen, what does We Consciousness mean when it says the most important thing is that we are all one? Why is that said, and why is this important?
Okay, let me begin by saying everything I'm saying is exactly what Neale just said. And let me briefly tell you how the We Consciousness started to come through me. A few years ago, after best-selling author Dr. Wayne Dyer made his transition, synchronistic events connected his family with myself. And the first of which, I was sitting on a bus. I was ready to speak about life after death in Orlando, Florida, right after Dr. Dyer made his transition. And right before that, they were going to have a tribute to Dr. Dyer. So I'm sitting on the bus, and there was one seat available, which happened to be right next to me. And in walked Serena Dyer, which is one of his daughters, and the rest is history. So right after that experience, he started to come through with very profound messages for Serena and the rest of his family, 6 of his children and his wife. And the bottom line was they knew without a doubt that his life continued after the physical body passed. One such message was at the very moment that his daughter was ready to give birth. He told me to call his daughter Serena at that moment, and I called her, and she wasn't answering the phone. And he said, "Call her again, call her now." And as I'm calling her, her other sister answered the phone. And I said, "Just put the phone next to Serena's ear, whatever she's going through. He wants Serena to know Daddy's there, Daddy's there." So, to make a long story short, they knew without a doubt that life continues. But let me say, right after that, he was so excited to talk about the afterlife. And he was so excited to talk about the We Consciousness. The We Consciousness is the interconnectivity of everyone and everything. The most important truth is that we are all one. And our oneness encompasses our oneness with God, with the angels, with ascended masters, with enlightened beings from other areas of the universe, with deceased loved ones, with all animals, with all of nature, and it oftentimes my clients and friends, they say it's difficult to understand this oneness when we're here in the physical body. But I tell them that it's very important to meditate and quiet your thoughts so that you're more on par with the energy of who you really are. Those who've had near-death experiences, those who have been clinically dead and come back to life to talk about what they experienced, they talk about going through a life review where they're able to see and feel how they have affected each person they encountered in their lives as if they are the other person. The reason is they are the other person, and they're able to feel that connection in an instant because their body is not separating them from anyone else, right? So we want to bring that connection here on the physical plane. And another point of the We Consciousness, before I end, is our connection with God. God is within every one of us. Just as Neale said, we are magnificent beings of light and love, and we can create amazing miracles in our lives and in the world as well. The only difference between miracle workers and those who are not are that the miracle workers remember who they are. That's it. So let's bring that into our lives right here and now. Remember who we are. We're the divine miracle workers, and we can create peace in our lives and in the lives around us. And remember that whatever we do to ourselves or another affects the whole.
Wow, beautiful, Karen. So let's just take a conscious breath into that. Beautiful. And thanks for also sharing the story about how We Consciousness came into being. It's an extraordinary story about how Wayne Dyer and other St. Francis and Ascended Masters were involved in bringing this important message that's the very same message from Conversations with God to the earth. So I'm going to add a little here just for many Global Oneness Days, many of us that are viewing the program are, I'll call it seasoned people on the path. But for people that aren't seasoned, we're not, when we talk about living, about awakening oneness, about planetary awakening and oneness, we're not talking about creating something new, about creating a oneness that's not here now. We're not talking about that at all, because this is actually ancient wisdom. It's a timeless truth that goes back over millennia. And almost all sacred texts, including the Bible, reference oneness. As well, science has affirmed this spiritual wisdom, starting with Erwin Schrödinger in 1933, who was the Nobel Prize winner for physics, who shared quantum physics, thus reveals a basic oneness of the universe. And then many contemporary scientists who've made it their life work to talk about about our oneness, this deep interconnection, or sometimes they'll call it entanglement, but also oneness. Nassim Haramein, a physicist, Gregg Braden, Bruce Lipton, a biologist, Lynne McTaggart, and many others that are in most of our communities that write books, give lectures, etc., to talk about the oneness in all of life. So oneness is actually ultimate reality. Now, I'm not asking people to make that leap if they're not there. It's a truth that we have to feel into, to go within and to see if we resonate with this, with what we believe is ultimate reality, oneness. And then if we do, if we resonate with this message and we believe it's true, then our invitation is each of us in our own way to live into the unity of all of life, to live as an expression of oneness. And where Neale was talking about the example of how we're actually taking care of the world around us, because that's our true self. That's what oneness means, right? Is a self with a capital S, where we're actually cells in the body of the earth or humanity or even the cosmos. And healthy red blood cells carry oxygen around to the body. And then we can come into more elevated roles where we're even more than just carrying a little oxygen around to the earth. So, but that's our invitation, is to feel into what is our particular expression of unity, of oneness. How might we live into the unity of all of life? What does that look like? Because when we're in oneness, it says that we're eternal and we have unlimited capacities or potential. And why would we want to live as anything other than that in some false reality of separation and the old American dream, etc., when these are just illusions, right? So that's the invitation here in Global Oneness Day, if it resonates, for us each to live into the unity of all of life, to be an expression of that, to follow our soul's calling, to focus on the evolution of our own soul. And in doing so, we'll create an incredibly powerful invitation to all those whose lives we touch. Okay, so I want to thank so much, again, Neale Donald Walsch, Karen Noe, and viewers for joining us for this opening ceremony. Be sure to stay tuned for the three amazing panels that follow this one today: Evolution of Science, Spirituality and Oneness, The Impulse of the Soul. Gregg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Lynne McTaggart, Michael Beckwith, Mathew Fox, and Thomas Hübl are speakers in these three panels that follow this one today on October 19th. And in closing, I want to thank Neale Donald Walsch, Karen Noe, and all of the speakers participating in our Global Oneness Day celebration this week. I also want to thank our affiliate partners, the 2019 panel hosts, all of the speakers, and my colleagues in Humanities team who work on Global Oneness Day year-round. Together, you make this day possible. Okay, and before we close this program and begin the next one, we're going to be silent for 10 seconds to center ourselves in oneness with the divine, each other, and all of life. We call this a oneness moment. We're going to be silent now for 10 seconds, beginning now. Welcome, everyone, to the Evolution Through Science panel. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities team, and happy Global Oneness Day, and thanks so much for joining us. The Science panel is always one of our most viewed panels, and it begins now. If you'd like to explore the leading edge of science, connection, and oneness, and the deep spiritual implications behind science, you're in the right place. Each of the scientists who were part of a program we created together called the Science of Self-Empowerment are back today to talk about their research, their conclusions, and their empowerment transformation techniques. I believe you'll find the panel discussion to be very powerful and enlightening. I'm going to introduce you to the panel now. I'm going to introduce panel members one at a time, and then we'll go right to questions and panel discussion. Gregg Braden is a New York Times bestselling author and internationally renowned as a pioneer in bridging science, spirituality, and the real world. Gregg's work is now featured on the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, the Sci-Fi Channel, ABC, and NBC. His discoveries have led to 11 award-winning books published in 38 languages. He is the author of The Isaiah Effect, Human by Design, and many other best-selling books. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Gregg.
Oh, Steve, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm honored to be with this panel. And I want to say hello and welcome to all of our viewers, all of our listeners today. Thank you for tuning into the science panel.
And great to have you with us, Gregg. And next up, Bruce H. Lipton, PhD, is an internationally recognized leader in bridging science and spirit, a stem cell biologist, best-selling author of The Biology of Belief, and recipient of the 2009 Goy Peace Award. He has been a guest speaker on hundreds of TV and radio shows, as well as a keynote presenter for national and international conferences. I'll be welcoming Bruce near the end of this program when he joins us to respond to his questions. Next, Deborah Rozman, president and co-CEO of HeartMath, has over 30 years experience as a business executive, serial entrepreneur, psychologist, author, and educator. She's been involved with HeartMath since its inception, first as a founding executive director of the nonprofit Institute of HeartMath, then as executive vice president of HeartMath LLC, and for the past decade as founding director, president, and CEO of Quantum Intech Inc. DBA HeartMath Inc., and more recently of HeartMath LLC. Welcome to Global Oneness Day, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's really a privilege to be here and excited to be sharing the latest science with my co-panelists.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for being here. And Howard Martin brings more than 30 years of experience in business and personal development to the position of Executive Vice President, Strategic Development. Howard's responsibilities include global alliances, marketing, and program and product development. Howard has been instrumental in assisting Doc Childre in the development and teaching of HeartMath's programs since its inception. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Howard.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for Humanity's team for hosting this wonderful program, for having us, and glad to be here with Deborah and Gregg today. Looking forward to our discussion.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Thanks so much for being here. And once again, I'm truly excited about this panel. I've been looking forward to convening this program since the start of the year. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go right to questions and discussion. So Gregg, I'm going to begin with you, if I may. Your research concludes that man did not slowly descend from Neanderthal. So what most of us learned in high school science is not true. How did you come to this conclusion, and what are the implications?
Well, I'm going to start with the implications first, Steve. You know, our world is changing. I know my life is changing. Our viewers' lives are changing. And we are presented with challenges that we have never seen in 5,000 years of recorded history. The better we know ourselves, the better we know ourselves, the better equipped we are to embrace and to thrive, not just survive, but to thrive in the new world that's emerging. And that's where these new discoveries are coming in, Steve. You know, we're all interested in our history. We're all interested in our origin. It would be interesting as a philosophical question at any time. But what we're dealing with right now is much more than philosophy. This goes right to the core of the way we have been taught to think about ourselves, our relationship to the earth, our relationship to the cosmos, perhaps most importantly, our relationship to one another. And these new discoveries, Steve, are telling us that we absolutely are not the product of a random process of mutations that happened sometime in our distant past. This is the story that we have been steeped in. When I was in school back in the 1950s, 60s, 1970s, and many of our viewers, many of our panelists, we were taught that we are the product of this a fluke of biology is what many people call it, random mutations that happen for reasons that we don't understand. And the bottom line is the new DNA science. This sounds like science fiction, Steve. It sounds like the science fiction from Jurassic Park, where we now are able to extract the DNA from the fossilized remains of ancient forms of life, including the forms of life that we were taught are our ancestors, that we have descended from. And when we now reconstruct the genome from those ancient forms of life and compare their DNA to our DNA, the big surprise is that it's telling us that we did not descend from the forms of life, such as the ones you just mentioned, from Neanderthal. As a matter of fact, they're telling us that we shared the earth with Neanderthal. We walked the earth with them. The science is saying we probably had Neanderthal boyfriends and girlfriends. We interbred. So, many of us do have Neanderthal DNA. People ask me this all the time. They do Ancestry.com or 23andMe or, one of these DNA analysis programs. And they come back and they say, well, look, I've got Neanderthal DNA. And many of us do because, this is precisely the point, because we shared the earth with them and interbred with them. It means that we could not have descended from them if we were actually sharing the earth with them. So now the big question is, if we know where we did not come from, where did we come from? And this is where the DNA science is also beginning to fill in a lot of the blanks and many of the missing pieces. What the science is showing, Steve, is that we as modern humans, we're called anatomically modern humans. We appeared on the earth 200,000 years ago, and that scientific fact is not contested. You can Google that. Most scientists are in full agreement with the 200,000 year date. The question is, where did we come from? Because there appears to be no evolutionary path leading to our emergence. We showed up fully intact, fully enabled with the brain capacity that we have now, the body proportions, the genome that we have right now, and all of the functions that we have right now. 200,000 years ago, we haven't changed. That is not Darwin's idea of evolution. Now, as a scientist, I cannot say where we did come from because our science has not been allowed to follow the evidence to where it leads so that we can answer that question. We've been so tied up in supporting what is called the standard model, the old story of evolution, and trying to fit every iota of evidence into the old story. Now, as a geologist, I have to be very clear. I'm a degree geologist. Evolution is a fact. I've seen it in the fossil record for many forms of life, plants, insects, animals. That story now is breaking down when it comes to humans. And a new human story is emerging. And it's a beautiful story, Steve, of hope, possibility, self-regulation. This is the key. We have had this ability to self-regulate our biology from the moment that we appeared 200,000 years ago. Scientists say it appears to be the result of an intentional, this is where it gets really tricky in the world of science, the result of an intentional fusion of very specific chromosomes that give us the abilities that we have today. And this science panel is going to be talking about what those abilities mean. I'm passionate about this conversation because when we begin to understand that we're not the product of a random process, it changes the way we think about ourselves. And it's that change that hopefully leads to us healing the fear and the hate that has emerged from so many different places in our world today as we are globalizing and pushing together religions and cultures and ways of thinking. We begin to think of ourselves as something more than a fluke of biology. That opens the door to peace.
Yes, it does. Well, thank you. And there's a lot to cover there, the science and implications. Thanks for bringing all that in, Gregg. And that sets the table, as you mentioned, nicely for this discussion. So Deborah, let me come over. HeartMath shares about synchronizing the heart, brain, and the body. What is your process for doing this?
Well, let me follow on what Gregg said, because he talked about self-regulation. And the capacity for self-regulation is unique to humans, but we have to activate it. It has to be self-generated, self-activated. And the heart from the research at HeartMath and other places, is actually a key into the self-regulatory process. So when we activate heart qualities, heart attributes that have been talked about from time immemorial in ancient traditions, religions, cultures, like love, care, compassion, kindness, appreciation, gratitude, all the uplifting qualities we associate with the heart, are really not religious qualities. They're qualities that actually activate the synchronization or harmonization between the heart, the brain, and the nervous system. And when we feel genuine heart attributes like love or compassion or appreciation, it creates a change in the heart's rhythmic beating pattern and in the heart rate. And that change you can see if you're hooked up to a heart rate variability monitor. You can see the change in the pattern from when you're stressed or frustrated, a very chaotic, irregular pattern, to when you're feeling those heart qualities, a very smooth, ordered, harmonious, coherent sine wave, like in physics, called a coherent waveform. The heart is actually signaling the brain through the medulla, through the up into the amygdala, the emotional memory center, to the thalamus, the center in the brain that synchronizes cortical function. And it's sending that signal about how we feel through that heart rhythm pattern, like Morse code, to the brain and body. With every heartbeat, the heart is beating information in the electromagnetic field of the heart about how we feel to every cell of our body. So as the heart signals these wonderful positive emotional qualities that we may be feeling to the brain, the thalamus synchronizes the information and sends it to the frontal lobes. That is where we have the capacity for impulse control, for self-regulation. And as we learn to activate more of this coherent heart rhythm, we have more of a coherent alignment between heart, brain, nervous system. The brain then tells the body how to respond. The brain is really an incredible pattern matching computer. So it's going to look at the heart rhythm pattern and it's going to say, okay, that's an incoherent pattern. That is, I've experienced that before in the amygdala. That's an anxiety pattern. I'm going to trigger and develop an anxiety habit. That shuts down our frontal lobes and higher cognitive functions. So we really are at the mercy of our fight, flight, fright response, our stress response. We can't think or see with higher reasoning or bigger picture or have access to the self-regulatory functions of the frontal lobes. We react. And we all know what that means. We get triggered, we react. And learning self-regulation means learning how to connect consciously and intentionally with the power of the heart, to be able to shift the heart rhythm pattern, which helps us more quickly shift mood, which shifts perception, which gives us access to this bigger picture thinking, our higher potentials. And as we practice, whether it's HeartMath techniques or other techniques, more and more, to shift our downsided projections, fears, into a neutral place at least, and activate more of that heart rhythm coherence, which creates coherent alignment throughout the body, we start to enhance our perception. We start to become who we really are and the potential of humanity, this bigger being, our larger self. But the key is really in the choice to shift to the heart and replace judgments with compassion. Replace fear with perhaps intelligent concern, with more balance and poise to approach it so that we can get more coherence to see what the most appropriate response would be. It's really choosing love. And if you think of love like a rainbow of frequencies, compassion, gratitude, kindness, forgiveness, care, non-judgment, allowance, latitude, all of these heart qualities are aspects of that rainbow, are aspects of that pie of love, which you will. And whichever ones we select, we call it attitude replacements, to actually approach and feel, it just triggers a whole global change in response in our brain and body for our health, our performance, our relationships, our connection, and gives us access to what we call the heart's intuitive guidance, the heart's wisdom. And when we get that connection, we make choices moment to moment that are best for ourselves, others, and the wholeness. And that's really the potential of humanity. That's what the science is showing. That physiology underpinning a lot of the meditation practices, the traditions, the mantras, the prayers, is really designed to help us get into that heart rate rhythm coherence, to be able to have that activation of the wholeness of our system into that harmony, and then activate our capacity for emotional composure, for self-regulation, for becoming our best self.
Oh, beautiful. I could listen to this science of evolution discussion all day long. I suspect that the viewers feel the same way. Wow, just astounding. And as you mentioned, maybe it all comes down to love. Just going into the expression of love, and it activates all of these things that you talk about. Yeah, thank you, Deborah. So Howard, how can we develop a greater capacity to sustain a positive perspective and access intuitive flow throughout the day, even in the midst of challenges?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. Just kidding. Well, it's not easy, especially in these times, based upon the things that Gregg has said about the changes we're going through. Deborah's talked about, a lot of different aspects and angles of it all as well. I think we can make it simple. I mean, there are certain aspects that we have as human beings that are the best parts of who we are. We can call those, core heart values and things like that. But, the essence of who we are is truly as human beings. Now, what happens in life is that through the events of life, through all the emotional triggers that we have, through all the projections that we have about how we're going to come out in various situations in the future and all of that, we end up sort of losing this connection to this part of ourselves. We can say we have it, and it triggers at different times in our life, but in the moment-to-moment, day-to-day, it gets tough. The speed of change is accelerating really, really quickly. So one of the first steps I would recommend to anyone that's listening right now is you got to take pauses. You got to slow down a little bit, at times. The term we have here at HeartMath is called spot checks. You're taking a moment to just step out from the game, step out from the story that you're in right now, and just make a connection with that part of yourself where your best self really comes from. My life's work's been about heart, so naturally I feel like it's a heart intelligent or heart related place inside of ourselves that is where these best parts of ourselves come from. So taking little time outs, moment to moment, day to day, is really key to keeping that connection. Now, when we do slow down a little bit and when we do make connection with our heart, what happens is perceptions about things can change really quickly, and that's the good news. We are developing new capacities as human beings. The science is showing that. The behavioral changes that we're seeing in society are reflecting that. We are evolving. And one of the ways in which we're evolving is developing a greater ability to choose what we're feeling, to choose our own emotional responses to the events of life. Now, if we want to let the speed of change and the story of our day run us around and keep us in the stressful thoughts about what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, who did what, who said what, all the judgments and things that, that show up in our life, we cut ourselves off from intuition. When we slow it back down and we begin to reconnect with our heart's intelligence and begin to ask it and look for guidance from it, then we will access more of what we call intuition. And the key to that is learning to better manage what we're feeling. Most people think emotions are simply reactions to things, and that we just react emotionally to the various events of life. It's true that we have emotional reactions constantly to every single bit of input that we ever receive. Every stimulus that we have creates an emotional response. What gets missed in this equation, though, is that we also have the ability to choose emotions. And that's part of the evolution of us as human beings, is a greater capacity to actually do that. To recognize, wait a minute, right now I'm feeling a bit agitated. Well, instead, I think I could feel calm. And to know that you can make that choice and actually exercise the ability you have to make that feeling of calm show up and to bring yourself out of the irritation into a more calm place. When you do that as best you can, throughout the course of a day, a week, a month, or a year, you evolve. You change, your perceptions change, and you have the ability to manage your emotions better And in doing so, that is how, to answer your question in a sort of a rambling way, that is how you access more of the intuitive qualities that bring in the new insights, bring in the new angles of view, the new solutions to issues and problems. The inner voice of the heart just gets louder when we have in place an understanding and a desire to better regulate what we're actually feeling. To me, that's the key. So to summarize what I said, it's a heart thing that makes that happen. Slowing down, spot checking during your day, bringing forward the qualities of the heart into your interactions, into your thoughts, into your perceptions, and doing that with some consistency rather than just letting the speed of the day run you around. It's going to naturally open anybody up to accessing more of what we call intuition, this field of information that's nonlinear, that can download on us in a moment with new insights and new perspectives. And that's the way I go about it. It's just doing that the best I can.
Yeah, boy, that sounds good. Yeah, the speed of the day running you around. Everybody can use less of that. Yeah, thank you, Howard. Perfect. So obviously our discussion is really going in the direction of the heart. So Gregg, how can we access cells in the human heart to awaken extraordinary abilities?
You know, I'm going to build on what Debbie described so eloquently, and I tell you, Howard nailed it right on. I really want to emphasize this with our viewers. Viewers, you and I have the ability that no other form of life is known to possess, and that is the ability to choose, just as Howard said, to choose the emotions that we experience rather than simply responding to what the world is giving us. We're taught to react to our external world, and we certainly do that, and we know how to do that very well. But the ability to choose the emotion that we are experiencing in our bodies in a moment in time is such a rare and precious ability and such a key to what we're talking about when we talk about self-regulation. I'm just going to go back to the first conversation. I wasn't sure, Steve. I forgot how long we were supposed to speak. So I cut this piece short. But what I want our viewers to know is that, without getting too technical, human chromosome number 2 is a very mysterious chromosome in the human genome. It is the second largest chromosome in our genome. It makes about 8% of all the DNA in every cell. It appears to be the result of an ancient fusion of 2 pre-existing, completely intact chromosomes that were fused into a larger chromosome. And the reason I'm saying this is there's one particular gene, TBR1 is the gene, that gives us all of the abilities that we're talking about right now. It's responsible for our brain, 50% larger than any other, our nearest primate relatives, any other of the primates. It's responsible, here's the key, for our uniquely human capacities of empathy, sympathy, compassion, self-regulation. And it is this ability of self-regulation that we possess today because somehow these genes were fused in a way that cannot be attributed to evolution as we know it today. Something happened 200,000 years ago to other genes as well, but specifically this chromosome 2. And it is the underlying factor for everything that we're talking about right now. So we appear to be wired to thrive in times of extremes. We are wired to self-regulate and to choose our response to our external environment. And this is what the key to so many of the ancient and the indigenous traditions has been about, not telling us how it happened, but helping us to understand how to apply these things in our lives. So I've spent a lot of my adult life, the bulk of my adult life, with ancient and indigenous traditions. I've researched the texts. I've been with the healers and the curanderos and the shamans and the yogis and the mystics, each in their own way, that have found techniques to access precisely what Debbie described so eloquently, and the techniques that Howard is describing. They have all found ways to access these experiences in their heart. They dedicated their lives and they moved into isolated, remote places and monasteries and mountaintops, halfway around the world, renounced their worldly possessions because they believed that's what was necessary to access this uniquely human capacity. What I believe that we're saying here today, Steve, is what people in the past have called extraordinary abilities that we're talking about, I personally believe, and I think many of our panel members believe, they're actually ordinary abilities that we simply have forgotten in our lives. And as we embrace these techniques, then the change in our world becomes much less fearful. We learn to thrive in the change because we're not placing our sense of well-being in the world around us, in our external world. We are self-regulating the way that we feel about the change in the world. And in that way, that's where we find our mastery, and that's where our power begins. One of the universal themes that every indigenous tradition I've ever been with has used in accessing this is when they move their awareness from their thinking mind into their feeling heart, they simply touch their heart center. And sometimes they do it with an open palm, sometimes they'll do it, you know, with a symbol on the chest, sometimes they'll just do it with a finger or two. And the reason they do that, Steve, is so fascinating, is because our awareness will always go to the place in our body where we feel the touch. So I'm going to invite our listeners, just try it right now. Touch your heart center gently. And notice, number one, how your body feels when you do that. Number two, your awareness goes to the place where you feel the touch. Now, this is important because the heart is not a polarity organ. It's not like there's a left brain and a right brain in the cranial brain. The heart doesn't work in that polarity. So the 40,000 specialized cells, the sensory neurites that were recently discovered in the human heart, that think, feel, and remember independently of the cranial brain. When we draw our attention to our heart, we're drawing our attention to an intelligence, a field, a center of intelligence in our bodies that connects to the greater field. And it's not a polarity intelligence. And where that empowers us, Steve, and this is, again, a long answer to a short question, is it helps us to objectively respond to what life is showing us. When we respond from the mind, our mind always in polarity is always looking at the right, the wrong, the good, the bad, the light, the dark, the failure, the success, and all the judgment and self-esteem loops. And the heart does not do that. Part of my heritage, my genetic heritage, is Southeastern Cherokee from southern Missouri and northeastern Oklahoma. And in the Cherokee tradition, there's actually a word for what we're doing. It doesn't exist in the English language. The word in Cherokee is called Shante Ishta. Shante Ishta means single eye of the heart, the eye of the heart that sees what's true for us in the moment, rather than in the polarity of the mind that's always in judgment. And when we can access this intelligence, self-regulate our ability to feel the feelings that we choose to feel in our heart, to send the signals to the brain that empower us, that regenerate ourselves, that rejuvenate us in life, that give us resilience to change, access to deep intuition, cellular regeneration, and so much more. That's where our mastery begins. And that leads me back to the very first thing that we said in this panel. The better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world, the less we fear our own power. So by accessing this universal ability that every one of us is born with, and we've had since we appeared 200,000 years ago, by accessing our hearts, we empower ourselves not to survive, but to thrive in the new world that's emerging. And that's just what we're wired to do, Steve.
Yes, wow. Well, you know, again, I could curl up in a ball and listen to the science of evolution all day, and I suspect true for our viewers too. It's why this panel is always one of the most viewed panels. It's just extraordinary to understand the science better and the implications of the science. So, yeah, moving from our thinking mind to our heart center, and that's certainly been a theme here across the panel. So, Howard, I'm going to come over to you if I may, and this is a little bit of a technical question, so bear with me. But how can people reduce the activity of the sympathetic nervous system that speeds heart rate and constricts blood vessels, and increase the activity of the parasympathetic nervous system that slows the heart and relaxes the body?
Well, I mean, to do that, I mean, the obvious way that most people do it is just simply through breathing. And breathing is good. Breathing can bring about the sympathetic changes that you're talking about. You know, it can create those kind of changes in someone. But that's not going to necessarily solve the bigger issues of how we deal with the speed of change, how we deal with stress, etc. bringing about that sort of, trying to balance out those two parts of our all-important sympathetic nervous system is just the first step. It's not just about like a seesaw, like, okay, I'm having a lot of sympathetic, so now I need to do some breathing and bring in some parasympathetic, and you end up in this situation where you're seesawing back and forth. It takes bringing those two systems into alignment rather than simply trying to balance them out. Like, how do you synchronize those two systems so they're really working together in the very best possible way? Our research has shown that requires not just breathing, but also making a shift in our emotional state. Back to the same theme that I was talking about earlier. In other words, we'll see a coupling of the power and the power spectrum of looking at the sympathetic nervous system when we bring in that positive, uplifting emotion. That's when that begins to happen. And that state is called coherence. I think Deborah alluded to it earlier. Coherence is this highly ordered state where all the major body systems are synchronized and working together for maximum efficiency. It is triggered by and accompanied by sustained, regenerative, uplifting emotions. So what that means is yeah, you can breathe, and I think breathing is important. And most heart math techniques have a breathing component, focusing in the area of the heart, imagining as if your breath is flowing in and out through that area. That does begin to bring about more of the balance within the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. But what that is really doing is setting the stage for something more important to happen, which is that emotional shift. Life changes when we shift emotion. It doesn't change much when we don't. It is pretty simple. So when we begin to bring in some of the emotions that I think have long been associated with heart, this concept of heart, like more care, appreciation for the good things in our life, certainly more compassion, extra kindness, less judgment, those type of heart qualities, that is what brings about the big changes occurring in this relationship between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So heart-focused techniques that focus on breathing, but also focus on activation of these emotional qualities associated with heart are, to me, the best way for this to happen. And that's what our science has shown over and over again. As we enter this coherent state, which represents what you're talking about, we enter in this coherent state when we go through that process, go through those steps. And it has everything to do, again, with what we're feeling. Now, I know that's, sort of repeating what I said earlier, but understanding how to better regulate this beautiful gift of emotion that we all have, that Gregg pointed out very appropriately, that we're the only living system on the planet that has it. Learning how to accept this gift and to use it in a better way represents, to me, one of the next frontiers in human evolution. That's where we're going on the inside as a global species. The good news is that it's available now more so than ever before. This is part of the shift. This is part of what people have been talking about. The shift isn't just about understanding the cosmos. It's also about how we make better sense of this gift of life that we have. That's what the shift is, when an understanding from sky meets the street. That's when life changes. It has everything to do with learning how to navigate emotionally and make these emotional choices. And one of the represented effects of doing that is a better relationship, a more synchronized relationship between sympathetic and parasympathetic parts of our nervous system.
Alrighty, yes, simple as that. Yeah, thank you, Howard. So yeah, better regulation, bring ourselves into a coherent state, create an emotional shift. Or some of us is as you distill down all of the wisdom here. Yeah, thank you, Howard.
Sure.
So Deborah, now how can people improve the body's hormonal balance and immune system response? Sometimes you talk about by increasing the presence of joy, gratitude, compassion, and love.
So it's all tied together, what we're talking about, what Gregg and Howard and I'm talking about, and it all comes back to the heart. The heart is really central director, the master coordinator of rhythm in the body. And, in the 1990s it was called the decade of the brain, but it was really the decade of the heart, too, because it was the first time that modern science really realized that the heart is a hormonal gland. It's producing as much oxytocin, serotonin, and other hormones as the brain. The heart is also communicating and giving instruction to the brain. Most of the wires, the nerve, the information going between heart and brain is what's called afferent. The heart telling the brain what to do. Through the blood pressure wave, the heart rate variability pattern, and the electromagnetic field that embraces and encompasses the brain and body and radiates way out, can be measured 3 to 5 feet from the body. It is bathing the brain and the cells in the information frequencies of how we feel. So emotion is so important to the immune and hormonal system, because if our heart is radiating with every beat this incoherent stress wave, that is going to impact our cells, our hormonal system, as well as the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic overactivation. We go into depletion, adrenal fatigue. We end up with a whole host of cascade of problems because we're constantly in this stress bath unless we learn how to self-regulate it, unless we learn how to go back to the heart, reset, reboot, and get some more synchronization or coherence going in the system. And that's where love, care, joy, the qualities of the heart you just talked about, they generate harmony. They generate coherent waveforms in the heart rhythm pattern. They activate the heart's intuitive guidance and intelligence. They actually activate these 40,000 neurons that are in the heart that Gregg was referring to that can learn, feel, see, and remember. And they're telling the brain that the body's in a state of harmony rather than a state of stress. And when the body's in a state of stress, the brain produces cortisol, the stress hormone, and overproduces adrenaline. And that imbalances our immune system. So the autonomic nervous system actually controls the immune system and the hormonal system in 90% of the body's involuntary functions. So most yoga, ancient yoga, is about self-regulating the autonomic nervous system, and all these practices that Gregg was referring to are really helping people regulate the 90% that's automatic for health, well-being, but also perception, intelligence, performance, wisdom, what we call extraordinary abilities open up as we get heart, brain, spirit, emotions, mind, all of this coherent, aligned, synchronized. And so we have the ability to put our hands on the regulator, and that involves the feelings of the heart. So again, the quickest way we've seen in our research and teaching in all walks of life, from schools to health professionals to corporate performance to athletic performance to patients in many, many chronic diseases, dramatic changes happen as people learn how to bring their system into more coherent alignment. And that activates a whole nother set of biochemicals, hormones, immune response. It just creates a natural resonance with nature and the body. And that truly starts with our choice to shift to the heart. Our choice, when we start to feel triggered by a stress in these crazy times of accelerated change where emotions really can't keep up with the speed of change, and our mind doesn't know what's going to happen. It can go quickly into fear or self-doubt or negation. It's so important for our health, for our immune system, our hormonal system, our perception, everything, for us to be able to learn how to shift and choose qualities that enhance our feelings of love and compassion and care. And that includes especially self-compassion. Especially self-appreciation, appreciating our efforts, self-care. And we tend to think that's selfish. We've been brought up in society that, loving yourself is narcissistic. But loving yourself, every time you make those choices to choose a different response, to come back to composure, to spot check, to self-regulate, to choose calm instead of freak out, to choose non-judgment instead of judgment and going down that blame track. Every time we make those shifts and we activate the heart's power and rhythm to help us do that, we are doing a tremendous act of self-love, of self-care with global impact on our own body, on our relationships, and the research is showing on the planetary field environment as well. So I just really want to emphasize the need for people to appreciate themselves, have compassion for themselves. It's so easy with what's going on to doubt ourselves, to start getting into down slants about our judgments. We have to turn all that around and know we're all here doing the best we can and have that compassionate latitude for ourselves and each other. And that enables us to restart the system and improve our hormones, our immune system, our whole mental, emotional system, as well as bring in more spirit, more guidance from our higher intuitive self.
Yeah, beautiful, Deborah. So, gosh, we are hard to believe, but we're already to the wrap-up stage here. So maybe just in 2 minutes, you could, Gregg, Howard, Deborah, just share what you'd like to add as we close this down. Certainly, so Global Oneness Day is all about this shift and this transformation, and this panel is sharing it's really about the heart, that where we come into heart coherence and create global coherence. So what are things that you might want to add here, Gregg, and you might share your website too, and then we'll go Howard and Deborah for 2 minutes each, if you would, please.
Well, I don't know about you, but for me, this time went unbelievably fast. I would like to add, Dr. Deborah Rozman, you rock. You absolutely rock. I love it when you pull things together so concisely the way you just did. And, Steve, this is the science panel. We, as a society, we've asked science to tell us who we are. And science is doing precisely that. Science is making new inroads using new technology and revealing deep truths about us, our relationship to our bodies, to the world, to the past. And the question is, do we have the courage to accept what the science is telling us? It is causing a lot of discord in the scientific community. What we're finding is a lot of scientists don't like the answers that are being revealed. There's a battle that is unfolding in our lives right now. It's a battle for our thoughts. It's a battle for our story. It's a battle for the way that we've been taught to think about ourselves. And the best science of the modern world is now giving us the reason to change the way we've been taught to think. Scott Turow, an American author, an awesome author, he said very famously, he said, "Who are we? But the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and believe." There's a new human story that's emerging, and it's based on the science that's overturning 150 years of traditional thinking. So I appreciate you, Steve, and our humanities team for making it possible for us to share we're just scratching the surface of some of this science. My colleagues, I want to thank you all for the work that you do and for the courage you have to bring that work forward. My website, www.greggbraden.com. That's Gregg with 2 G's, Greggbraden. That's 3 G's altogether, okay? But it's 2 G's on the end, Greggbraden.com. Check out that website to stay tuned with the newest discoveries that you're simply not seeing in the mainstream media, classrooms, textbooks, but it's peer-reviewed science, rock-solid science, writing the new human story.
Yeah, thank you, Gregg. Amen. And Howard, in 2 minutes, if you would, and then Deborah in 2 minutes.
Sure. Well, first of all, this is Global Oneness Day, so I hope everybody who's listening to this conversation today is feeling a connection, feeling connected to the larger whole, a recognition that, we're all one, really, energetically. We could go into a whole nother realm of science here around energetic connections between all living systems, but new science is showing that we are, in fact, all connected. We're connected in a variety of ways, seen and unseen, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge and recognize that now. We all need to have a bit more compassion, I think. The term that we are using here at HeartMath a lot is compassionate latitude, which means expanding that compassion a little bit to be more inclusive of what's going on. People are doing the best they can in their lives. And it's tough right now for a lot of people going through these changes. Science can help. Science provides security. One of the ways in which I see science as being useful is it increases the power of belief. When something is proven through science to be empirically true, then we can believe it easier. I think it's important now to take the new science and use it to verify things that our own heart's intuition has been saying to us. Use it in ways that we get that next level of security to act on what our hearts have been saying to us all along. The gentle nudges that come from our intuition, or sometimes when it's loud about what needs to change, about what we need to do or not do. These are all gifts that we're getting right now, and science can help to build the bridge to acceptance of those gifts. And I think that's part of the beauty of the science today, is that it's giving us the ability to feel more secure in what, our own hearts have been saying to us. So my feeling about it all is let's recognize that we're all connected, that we're all one, that we're all, playing in the same game, and we're playing in the same big yard. And let's put out more love and care and compassionate latitude for each other. That will lead to new scientific understanding, so that when we have a show 2 or 3 years from now, there's going to be plenty more to say, because that's what it takes to really break through the ceiling of understanding, where new science can show up to give us the proof of some of the things that we really do know deep in our hearts are true. So I wish everybody a great Global Oneness Day. Thanks for having me on the program today.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. And yeah, we are deeply interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. We really are all one. Yeah. So Deborah, over to you for the final 2 minutes here, and your website, please, for HeartMath.
Well, I would just really want to thank you for sponsoring this, as you have year after year after year. Global Oneness Day, I feel people are seeing it's more than a concept or an ideal of oneness. It's coming into being and body of people perceiving it, feeling it, connecting. And yes, the internet and media is helping that, and it's creating a lot of stir and controversy and polarization. But out of that is emerging more heart, more care. You see it, you feel it, you hear it. People are talking about the heart. When they come together with the increasing number of natural disasters, they're talking about taking care of each other, paying it forward. There's certainly an expression and movement of heart. And the reason is because people are awakening to the reality of what we've all been talking about, the science of it. But it's also happening in that there's huge heart opening occurring in a new world being birthed in the old world, as more people feeling the oneness. And I'm honored to be here with Gregg and Bruce and Howard to talk about our discoveries, the leading edge of what we see happening in the world in terms of science, to give people that hope and confirmation of what they may be sensing or feeling inside. And I would love to leave people with the feeling that the choice to forgive, the choice not to judge, and that happens in ratios. We're not going to be perfect, and it's not about that. But the choice to do that more and more, and the choice to love, and to know that we're all growing up, maturing, learning, that is really the powerful shift. And it puts out a different vibration into the Earth's energetic fields. It lifts the vibration of the field environment. And some of this is being researched at HeartMath and other places, of the impact of our heart rhythm coherence, our heart coherence on brain, body, on each other, on our social coherence, our connectivity, and how we all get along. And then on global coherence, how we couple with the Earth's fields and all the changes the Earth's going through at the same time. And the more we have that coherent alignment, because coherence happens at every level of nature, from the quantum level to the macro level and inside us. And the more we can align with this shift process through the heart, the more we see what's going on, the more we have glimpses and can co-create with it and collaborate, because oneness is there, but for it to be a reality for human beings, we have to co-create it. We have to align with it. We have to connect and come back to it like a resonant frequency. And as many of us do that, it shifts the vibration, it lifts the vibration of the whole planetary field. And from our perception and understanding, it doesn't have to be billions of people to help shift and really create a whole new world. It's enough people who care to choose the way of love and to choose the way of, as I said before, self-compassion, true self-care, because that's what gives us the power to love others and to care for others and to have compassion for others, because we're not doing it for ourselves. it drains and we don't have the juice or the power we could have to really facilitate lifting others. And that's, to me, what we're all about. People listening to this are drawn to hearing about global oneness because we all want to participate, learn, contribute in some way. And I hope what we've shared today on the science will give people more of an understanding of the physiology of how we can interact with ourselves and each other in the world and really get ourselves more aligned and coherent to be able to contribute and co-create this new world that it's really about. So I'm honored to have spent this time with all of you, and we each have a unique part to play, Gregg, Bruce, Howard, myself, in this unfoldment of the research and others out there who are doing that. But I do believe that's what getting published, peer-reviewed papers, that's what helps other scientists who are fear-based or skeptical or stuck in the head see, well, maybe I should open to the heart a little more. Maybe there's something there. And any way we can facilitate that shift to the heart will help global oneness. So thank you.
And I think it's heartmath.com.
Yes. Heartmath.com.
Heartmath.com. Thank you so much, Deborah. Wow. So what a wisdom filled. Next, you will hear from Bruce Lipton, who will now be coming to the panel. And welcome, Bruce Lipton, to Global Oneness Day. It's great to have you with us.
I am so happy to be here because this is a very auspicious time to understand that global oneness is what is required for us to move through this very strange history where we're changing from one evolutionary paradigm into another. And this is the interface. So thank you for allowing me to be here with you all.
Oh, Bruce, thank you, because you're a real leader out front here in this whole shift, transformation, awakening, just saying it plain like it is of, hey, come on, people, now's our time. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here with us for Global Oneness Day.
Thank you.
All right, so the first question here, let's just jump right into this. So you share that environment, and of course, this I mentioned in your introduction when I read your bio, that you're a biologist, and you share that environment, not genes, is the key to understanding health and well-being. Can you talk a little bit about this, Bruce?
Yeah, Steve, well, one of the most important things is this, that almost everybody out there right now has been programmed with the belief that genes control the character of their lives. That as far as people know, they didn't pick the genes they came with. And so at the moment of conception, apparently there's like a program, here are your genes, and this is going to be your life, given the fact that we also believe that genes turn on and off. So they say a gene turned on, a gene turned off, and I go, why is that relevant? Because that's the belief then that control is not with you, the control is with the genes. And as a result, I say, what's the significance of the fact that A, I didn't pick the genes I came with, B, supposedly the genes control all the characters of my life, and C, that the genes turn on and off by themselves? The result is simple. We are victims of our heredity when we believe that. If there's cancer running in the family, oh my God, I can get the cancer, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, whatever. And when you say I'm a victim, you're really saying I'm powerless. I have no control over my health. And then we give up our power to the medical profession and say, listen, it's not working right, you fix it. When it turns out that belief system is 100% false. And the relevance is this. The new science is called epigenetics. And I say, but it sounds like the old science, genetics. I go, well, as a professor, what I was teaching medical students in school was the fact that genes control our life. That's the belief called genetic determinism, which simply implies that your life is not under your control. Your life is under the control of genes. You had no control over that. Victim, powerless. And then we look for someone to heal us, a rescuer. And so we give our life and our health over to the medical profession and say, okay, I can't do it. Victim of my genes, you fix me. Old belief, powerless. New belief is epigenetics, and the difference is simply this. When I say genetic control, that translates as control by genes. When I say the new science, epigenetic control, it's a revolution because epi means above. So epigenetic control translates as control above the genes. I go, wait, then what's controlling the genes? And now comes the miracle of modern day awareness, and that is our consciousness, our perception of the world, our environment. These are the factors that control our genes. I say, so why is that relevant? I say, I can change my environment. I can change my perceptions. So consequently, I'm actually the master of my genes, not the victim of them. And this is empowerment at the highest level. It says, I control the character of my life as compared to the old belief, I'm just unfolding a genetic program and that's how it works out. And I say, so the significance is this: we are empowered to change the character of our behavior, our genetics. We're the masters, we're the creators. But the problem is most people don't understand that the nature of that creation is based on the mind. And I say, why? Because the mind perceives the environment. The mind interprets the environment in this case. So I could live in the healthiest environment, but if my perceptions or beliefs say this is a very toxic environment, my cells don't see the real environment. They depend on my nervous system to translate the environment so that we can adjust our biology to conform with environmental needs. So my biology is dependent now on my nervous system to read that environment and then send the signals like a conductor of an orchestra to each of the organ systems to control the biology to fit the environment. And here's the problem. If our perception is correct, then our biology is in harmony with the world. If our perceptions are not correct, misperceptions, then we adjust our biology out of tune with the world around us, and that causes disharmony, and disharmony in biology is called dis-ease. And so we create our diseases. Less than 10% and presumably 1% of diseases connected to genetics. And I say, well, in a healthcare crisis that's affecting the globe, then where's the problem? And the answer is not the genes. The problem is the perception. And why is this important? We create perceptions, and we can change perceptions, and therefore we can change our health. The simplest understanding is placebo effect. I say, what does that mean? I say, I have a disease, I'm suffering. Doctor says, here's this newest pill. This is just for you. It's a special new thing. And you take this pill and you get well. And then you find out it was a sugar pill. And then I'm saying, so what really cured you? And the answer was, you change your perception. You change your belief and you change your genes. Same thing occurs in a spontaneous remission when someone has a cancer and then all of a sudden expresses a spontaneous remission, the cancer is gone. What caused the change? And the answer is a change in consciousness. So our mind is creating the state that we're in. And then when you look at the world and you see how much sickness and illness, I say, it's not the genes, it's the programming that keeps us out of being in harmony with the world that determines our biology, our behavior, our fate.
Boy, in my home, we now, this is a part of our discussion, even with our dog, as we talk about keeping her healthy, that it's all environment, it's not the genes. I mean, it's a constant thing that comes up, and thank you for that. And even epigenetics, people like Joel Osteen and others that have these huge, multi-million audiences globally, I hear them come in now with the epigenetics discussion, and it's all straight from your leadership and research. So thank you for that. Let me throw a tough one at you here relating to this day here, Bruce, Global Oneness Day. As you know, the prevailing belief out in today's world is, well, we're all separate, of course. You're over there, and I'm over here, and the tree and the earth and the divine. But the new science is saying, no, everything is deeply, deeply interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent, actually a part of one thing. Do you want to talk to that? Because it's why Global Oneness Day is here, is we're trying to bring awareness to what ultimate reality really is.
The interconnectedness that we're talking about is really supported by two fields, physics and biology. And physics, here's the significance. in physics, we all talk about a Newtonian world. And I go, what does that mean? That's a world that separates the universe into two realms, a physical material realm and an energy realm. So the universe is two realms. And that being a body and being in a physical realm, anything physical is affected by things physical. So if you're having trouble with your life, which is a physical expression, then drugs and chemistry and physical ways of intervening are what we seek. And I go, that's because we separated matter from energy. But then I say, what happened in 1925? Quantum physics put the two together and said matter is just a strange form of energy. I say, so what's the significance? I say, okay, here are two hands. If you look at them as being matter only, look, I've separated them, two separate hands. I can talk about each one independently of the other. But then when you find out this is an illusion, that it's actually all energy, and I say, well, energy doesn't have borders. Energy mixes together. It's all one big aquarium of energy. I say, why is it relevant? I'm made out of, this hand's made out of energy. This hand's made out of energy. Guess what? While you see them as separate, energy is always connected. Why? No borders to it. So the relevance is simply this. In the world that we live in today, based on quantum physics, the most valid science on planet Earth, quantum physics acknowledges this, that everything is energy, and as a result, there is no separation of anything in this universe. All energy is connected, and all of a sudden that illusion of separation has to disappear. Now, in biology, there's also the illusion of separation, and as a result, we see ourselves as just like being physical victims in a world that's going on around us. And it's interesting because what the new science of epigenetics talks about is that's a perception. If you believe you are separate, then you are separate. Not that you really are separate, but your belief is manifesting your reality. Oh, wait a minute, let's back up. Quantum physics, most valid science on planet, most tested, most verified of all sciences, recognizes first principle, consciousness is creating our life experience. Fact. Point. Change consciousness and you change life experience. If we've been programmed as we have with beliefs that cause disempowerment, self-sabotage, limitation, because we bought these beliefs, we disempower ourselves. So the foundation of quantum physics reveals that consciousness is creating the world. And if we don't like the world, we don't go out and physically change the world. We first start by changing our consciousness of the world, because we're manifesting a reality. There's a quote by Albert Einstein, so fabulous and short. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Well, that might sound abstract, except let's just say, what is field? The energy that we're in, the energy, the field, is the sole governing agency of the particle. Particle is matter, okay? So what's it saying? The field, the energy is the sole governing agency of matter. And it's really important to understand this because it says, since we are manifesting a field, then we have the ability to manifest a different expression of matter. And that, matter of fact, is not a different. We're expressing this field right now with this way, but if we change our field, we change the expression of this matter. And evolution is calling on us to say a very important point. The way humans have been living on this planet has precipitated the 6th mass extinction of life. 5 times in the history of this planet, life was thriving, and some cataclysmic event wiped out up to 90% of life. Last time, 66 million years ago, tropical flush forests all over with dinosaurs. A comet hits near Mexico, upends the ecosystem. Web of life collapses, 90% of life disappears. Today's 6th mass extinction, we're losing species of organisms faster than in previous mass extinctions, but it's due to human behavior. I say, well, how's that? And I said, well, human behavior is consciousness. And the consciousness that we're employing on this planet is self-destructive. And the idea is that we are causing our own extinction. And this is not 1,000 years from now. We're talking within the century and within a few decades, a couple more decades. They even say there won't even be any fish in the ocean. Planet Earth with no fish in the ocean? And who did that? We did that. overfishing, destroying breeding grounds, polluting the ocean. We've done this all over the planet in ecosystems everywhere. And then now we're failing. Now the planet is undergoing this sixth mass extinction. And the way out is what? Well, if facing this mass extinction, since we've created it, we are the ones that can change it. And I said, well, how are you going to change evolution? I say, first of all, you have to change your perceptions and your belief. The field, our consciousness field, as physics said, is creating this. If we change our consciousness, we change the field. And all of a sudden it says, then we're not victims, we are powerful creators. But then you have to look at your consciousness and say, is my consciousness supporting my life? And I say, well, you're playing programs from downloaded before age 7, 95% of your life. And what that really means is this: your basic programming the first 7 years is shaping the character of your life. And if your life is not in harmony, there's always a tendency to say, oh, I'm a victim. Things outside are preventing me from experiencing the things I want. And I go, no. We now know that your own subconscious, below conscious information is shaping your life. So if there's trouble in your life, it's not coming from the outside. It's actually being created by your consciousness. So is there a call upon us, all of us right now, is to say, darn it, we better change all of our collective consciousness right now. Otherwise, the end is looming right in front of us. And this is what the upheaval on the planet is all about right now. The upheaval is this: the chaos of the world is the civilization we've been living under is causing our own extinction. We need to create a new civilization. So the old one is coming down, the new one is coming up. But between the old one and the new one, there's this chaos, which is one coming down and one going up. And so when you look at the world right now and you see how scary it is, I just want people to understand this. This is the most important step in our evolution. We're breaking the old structure down so we can build one that we can thrive into the future. And so not looking at fear of what's going on, but looking at, wow, this is great. This is the opportunity to create a world we can thrive into, to create a better way of living.
Okay, perfect. And that'll be the last word. Boy, and how perfect for Global Oneness Day.
Right.
To bring all this in. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us here during the Evolution Through Science program. Gratitude to you, Bruce.
I appreciate this, and I appreciate everyone out there, because collectively, the future that we can move into is heaven on earth, because since we're creating it, why not do that one?
So what a wisdom-filled and heartfelt hour, and certainly we've contributed to this unfolding of the experience of global oneness here from this program's discussion. So huge thank you, Gregg, Bruce, Deborah, Howard. What a powerful and transformative hour, and so gratitude to you, friends. So during this program, we've brought together the 4 scientists who created a powerful 8-week program with humanities team called The Science of Self-Empowerment, Cellular Consciousness, Heart Intelligence, and the Untold Human Story. It was a huge success because each of the scientists, Gregg, Bruce, Deborah, and Howard, presented the science at the foundation of their research that affirms connection and oneness, and that creates the basis for self-empowerment. It was incredibly powerful to combine their scientific research and wisdom into one series. The Science of Self-Empowerment accelerates and deepens important Global Oneness Day concepts. So we're making it available as part of our Global Oneness Day 2019 program. An email is going out to you shortly today, so be sure to keep an eye out for the email. Again, it's on Science of Self-Empowerment. You can also read about it on the programs page on the Global Oneness Day site. Okay, in closing, I want to call attention to the quantum physics, biology, geology, and other science that affirms our connection and oneness. This science is applied in many modern fields, including quantum mechanics, health, education, relationships, personal empowerment, and much, much more. The web of life is real, as we've discussed during this program. We are all one. It's much more than a beautiful turn of phrase. It's a powerful description of ultimate reality. Global Oneness Day invites us to understand the power of our thoughts and the important role of metaphysics, and it invites us to live by a new golden rule where we understand that what we do to others, we do to ourselves, because there is no other. In this, we understand how to live into the unity of all of life, because we are deeply interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. Let's live with a positive purpose. And let our lives be an expression of our grandest truths. When we do this, we invite others to live this way also. Before long, everyone is living this way together, and we create the flourishing world and earth that we've all dreamed about and envisioned. This is the purpose of Global Oneness Day. Once again, I'd like to thank this panel, Bruce, Gregg, Deborah, and Howard, and all of the speakers participating in Global Oneness Day, our affiliate partners, the 2019 panel moderators, and my colleagues in Humanities team who work on Global Oneness Day year-round. Together, all of you make this day possible. Before we begin our next program, we're going to be silent for 10 seconds to center ourselves in oneness with the divine and each other. We call this a oneness moment. We're going to begin our oneness moment right now.
Hi, thank you for joining us for Global Oneness Day Spirituality and Oneness panel. I'm Karen Noe, and I'm the author of We Consciousness. We are all divine, infinite spiritual beings of love and light, having a temporary human experience on the planet. Or to say it in a different way, our physical bodies are finite and temporary, but our essence is immeasurable and eternal. Today, we're going to focus on our true selves, our spiritual essence. If more of us would remember this aspect of ourselves, who we really are, we'd easily be able to see the bigger perspective that we are all one. And whatever we do to ourselves or another affects the whole. Our priorities would change from fear to love, and we'd raise the vibration of our beautiful planet back to its true state of perfection. I am so excited about this panel. Each one of these amazing panelists remembers his or her true essence and encourages others to do the same. With us today are Peter Anthony, Sister Jenna, Patricia Cota-Robles, and Diane Williams. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's get right to it. Are you ready? All right.
Yep.
All right, let's begin with Diane. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Karen. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Okay, Diane is the founder and president of the Source of Synergy Foundation, an organization committed to consciously synergizing individuals, organizations, and efforts by tapping into the infinite source of the collective potential to serve as a positive force for global transformation. She serves as co-director of one of its main projects, the Evolutionary Leaders, in service to conscious evolution. She's a founding member of the Council of the Spiritual Caucus at the United Nations in New York. Most recently, she was acknowledged by the Emily Fund for a Better World as one of the heroes for a better world. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, I've heard these stories when I met you last month, but let's share it with everyone here. Since you were a child, you've had numerous unique spiritual experiences that have directed your life's work. What have they taught you? And how have they inspired you to support others in holding the greatest vision of what our universal community can be?
Thank you. First, I'd like to begin by thanking you, Karen, and Steve Farrell for inviting me to be part of Global Oneness Day, and to Garth, Tim, and all those that are making this amazing summit possible. I'm also delighted to be on this panel with Sister Jenna, my good friend, Patricia, and Peter. So I think we would all agree that almost everyone has been touched by a spiritual experience at least once in their lifetime. Something beyond the realm of what many may consider as normal. And whether it's a feeling or a sense of oneness with nature on a hike, or connecting with someone who has left their physical body, or perhaps during a deep meditation, feeling great peace and at one with the cosmic field that connects us all, these spiritual experiences expand our consciousness make us feel connected to something beyond ourselves. And in the end, we become more deeply aware of who we are as spiritual beings. So one of my very first memories I had of having a spiritual experience is climbing out of my crib when I was about 2.5 or 3 years old and finding my mother to tell her, "Mom, there are people in my room again." Because a few minutes earlier, I saw people standing by my crib looking down at me very lovingly. And it was only much later on that I realized that these people that I was seeing from time to time were from the spirit world. And my guess is that they were my ancestors and guides stopping by for a visit and showing me that there are other dimensions to reality. And one of the most significant things they and others that came to me later on taught me is not to have fear of death, as life doesn't end when we leave our physical body. If we can convince the mainstream of this, it could provide a great deal of comfort to those that fear what we currently call death, especially for them to know that the people that we love, come to us beyond space and time. And I know, Karen, your work deeply supports people in this way. So that's why it's important we share our stories of these spiritual moments as much as we can, so that we can support others to live into new realities that will totally transform our current worldviews. And at a very early age, children, they don't have the limitations of belief systems or other influences as we do when we get older. They are open channels that can connect directly with the other side. Children don't have to work at consciously shifting their minds in order to achieve an expanded state of consciousness. They are already there. So just I wanted to share another story. When I was about 7 years old, I had a near-death experience when I was hit by a large wave in the ocean. And while under the water, I saw my life flash in front of me. What left the deepest impression on me is that while I was under the water, I experienced a sense of bliss and love that was really indescribable. And I didn't feel like I was drowning because it felt that I was very much alive in a way that didn't seem to exist here on planet Earth. And I believe when we pass over, this is the loving energy that we meet. And this experience for me was a great gift. And one of the most meaningful things about it, as I'm able to share this experience with others, that even in the face of what some people might think would be a scary experience, especially for a little girl, which was facing death by drowning, it turned out to be an extremely beautiful spiritual experience. So these early experiences set me on my current spiritual path and clearly defined my life's mission, including my work to support the spiritual dimension at the United Nations. And in fact, the UN was built upon a spiritual foundation, as the founders and the key players were guided by universal values, spiritual principles, and practices. And in December 1944, when the founders were discussing the 12 major functions of the United Nations, one of these functions was to be the seeker of freedom. And in defining this term, it said that for humans to attain ultimate freedom, the United Nations not only had to promote material growth, but also spiritual growth. They knew that spirituality was an essential key to accelerating our personal and global evolution. And it's very important that adults support children's spiritual growth in whatever form that might take, as it's integral to the holistic well-being of humanity. Our spiritual experiences really help us lift the vibration of humanity so that together we can hold the greatest vision of what the children of the world, as well as ourselves and our universal community, can be. For me personally, all of my spiritual experiences have kept alive in me a sense of awe and wonder of our amazing universe, and have given me an expanded state of who I am as a soul. The same sense of awe and wonder that young children often exhibit so freely until social conditioning begins and they start to lose some of that special spark. So in closing, I'd like to offer two suggestions. One is in order to stay in the spiritual flow, it's really important to communicate, create, and evolve as a partner with the spiritual world on a regular basis in very direct and conscious ways. So that could be through meditation, prayers, having a conversation with the living intelligent field that connects us all, as well as with our spiritual guides and ancestors on the other side. The great thing about spiritual experiences is that they are accessible to everyone. Our spiritual power is sourced by the source that created the entire universe, and we are part of this source. And second, in order to make a direct spiritual connection, it's helpful if our spirits feel fully alive. In some ways, the weight of our society has suppressed our souls, and it's important for all of us to reflect upon what elevates our spirit, what makes us feel happy, connected, and alive. Maybe it's listening to music or singing, dancing, walking in nature, meditating, being with precious animals. Whatever it is, try to do that on a daily basis, as it will upshift your vibration. And once one begins to transcend the physical and mental planes, one begins to experience a heightened state of awareness, and the magical mystery tour will begin. And then all sorts of signs, synchronicities, intuitive knowing, insights, and clear messages will show up. And you will feel like there is something propelling you, and all aspects of your life start to go upward. And you will become like a magnet, attracting positive energy, interesting spiritual assignments, and awesome people and other beings in your life, because your energy is vibrating as one with the divine source of co-creation and manifestation. And that's when the magic truly begins. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, our next guest is Sister Jenna. Welcome, Sister Jenna.
Hi, everyone. Om Shanti, Shalom, and Salam Alaikum.
Sister Jenna is a spiritual mentor, author, renowned speaker, founder of the Brahma Kumaris Meditation Museums, and host of the popular America Meditating radio show. She serves as one of the evolutionary leaders in service to conscious evolution, and was selected by Empower a Billion Women 2020 as one of 100 most influential leaders. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the President's Lifetime National Community Service Award and the Everyday Hero Award by the Foundation for a Better Life. Her voice of influence is particularly needed in the wake of tragedy and increasing violence in our world. Okay, Sister Jenna.
Yes.
Thank you so much again for being with us.
It's always nice to see you and to hear you and to be in the atmosphere that you create in these summits. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Okay, you are a pioneer in creating 2 Brahma Kumaris Meditation Museums in Washington, D.C. I'm asking you, what has it been like bringing spirituality to Washington, D.C.?
Natural. I think because my nature is like that way, I'm pretty much the same inside out. Whatever mood or feeling I'm going through, I show up with that. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. There's nothing I can do about that. But just remembering many, many years ago when I came here, 22 years now I've been here, I was sent for 3 months to see if it would work. And 22 years later, it's working, and I'm happier about that. It has been a growing experience for me because it's not just about the Brahma Kumaris message or the museums that are here that are impacting millions of lives, but it's been interesting for me to see how it has been growing me as a person. And I've come to the foregone conclusion that all of this stuff that's happening in our world, as much as we keep trying to come up with policies, programs, activities, laws, which are important, which are very important, I keep feeling that there's something inside of me that has to keep changing. So the museums have been around now for about 10 years. And every face that I come across, every program that we do, every exhibit that's inside of the space, and to this day, I swear in my life, I have not ever walked into that museum and not valued the essence and image, something in the space that just makes me feel like this is incredible. This is just an incredible narrative and story because it just touches you when you're inside of it. And so for the 10 years that it's been open, what I feel it has been doing, it's like it's a space that's alive and it's constant. So whoever's coming inside of the space, they are inheriting the vibrations of everybody who leaves behind a better version of themselves. And because I am changing and my vibrations are also changing in the space, you know, and that is definitely seen with individuals who've been coming from day one till day now. And so I feel that the Meditation Museum being in a space like Washington, D.C., it serves the politicians, corporate leaders, young boys, young girls that have been doing kind of not so the best choices to keep them at a higher level. I keep seeing that the reason for its success, or the reason in which I show up for it, is there's a silence there. There's a silence that has a reduction of waste and negative vibrations. It's a silence that isn't supporting an absence of sound, but it's a silence that's supporting a soul that's building, that's returning to its purity, its childlikeness. I was smiling with Diane sharing because I had that same experience when I was 4 with my mom. And we were at this laundry place, and all of a sudden I felt like I was transported up, and there were all these subtle beings around me, and what I felt they were signaling to me was they were checking in on me to see where I was and if I was okay. And I think that what the museum is offering is everybody a chance to recognize that they're not in this alone. That you can come into the space and realize that there are so many people supporting you. You're not the only one suffering with whatever karmic story that you keep telling yourself and believing in, but that we're a community. And whatever thoughts you and I are having, it's supporting the global community. And if we can start to recognize the power of thoughts and how if we heal our thoughts, we can actually begin to heal the world, along with policies and laws and rules and all of those beautiful things. So I feel that right now, the role of the Meditation Museum in the nation's capital, and we're also offering classes to some interesting personalities, which you hear a lot in the news. It's about thought healing, thought therapy. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? And why? And when you can get to some sort of experience of that, a truthful experience, and then the introduction of the energy of the divine, the source, God, Allah, Jehovah, Krishna, that energy of love and purity that can amplify the good that's coming out of you because you're figuring out who you are. So the museum really, to me, is a space that's helping us to know ourselves at a much deeper level. It's helped me to learn about myself at a much deeper level. And it's been a natural, beautiful, humbling experience to be the person to keep sustaining it. So I feel like a little kid a lot of times when I show up in there too.
I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, my next guest is Patricia Cota-Robles. Hi, Patricia.
Oh, hi, Karen. How are you? It's wonderful to be here. And
Wonderful to meet you today. Patricia is co-founder and president of the nonprofit educational organization New Age Study of Humanity's Purpose, which sponsors the annual World Congress on Illumination. She now spends her time freely sharing the information she is receiving from the beings of light in the realms of illumined truth. The divine intent of these celestial sharings is to give humanity greater clarity and understanding as we progress through these wondrous but often challenging times on Earth. Patricia's philosophy is, every person is precious and divine, regardless of how far his or her behavior patterns and life experiences may be from reflecting that truth. We are not victims of our lives. We are the co-creators of our lives. Now is the time to create the lives we've always dreamed about. Again, Patricia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure.
So before we begin, for those listeners who don't know, can you briefly tell us who are the beings of light in the realms of illuminated truth?
Yes, the beings of light are just our sisters and brothers that have evolved to a higher level of evolution that are assisting us in our earthly experiences from the higher dimensions. And you know, we hear about as above, so below. Well, in this physical plane, we aren't expected to go through all the realms of academia and knowledge without professors and teachers and guides along the way. We aren't supposed to be just all-knowing. And we were never supposed to be just weeping and wailing through our valley of tears, through trial and error in this physical plane. We were always supposed to have the assistance of the higher realms of light. And these sisters and brothers are like college professors. They're all of the beings of light that we associate with the various world religions, as well as infinite beings throughout all creation that are working within the all-encompassing presence of the divine matrix of our omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent Father, Mother, God. So they're our teachers and our guides, and it's only when we fell into such dense frequencies of separation and duality that we lost awareness of them, as well as awareness of our true God self, our higher self. And we thought that we were our physical bodies and this physical plane was all that exists. So now what's happening is we are reversing the adverse effects of our fall from grace, and we are beginning to remember and reconnect with the realms of guidance and illumined truth that have been waiting for us to open up again to receive this divine sacred knowledge that will help us become the co-creators of the new heaven and the new earth.
Beautiful. So what do you think was the catalyst that motivated you to spend your life trying to help people improve the quality of their lives?
Well, I think we're in the midst of a very unique experiment, according to what the Company of Heaven is sharing with us. Never has a planet that's fallen to this depth of separation and duality, this level of pain and suffering, been given the opportunity to move this quickly into the light. And the reason this is occurring is because we are in the midst of a very rare event known as the shift of the ages. And we've heard some about that. I think that mostly that came to our awareness, that term, in 1987 when we began hearing about harmonic convergence. And that was talking about a particular completion of the calendar, of the cycle of the Mayan calendar. But the beings of light said the shift of the ages is far greater than that. It's a unique moment in time that happens every so many millions of years, when cycles within cycles within cycles throughout the whole of creation dovetail into the rhythmic momentum of the heartbeat of the cosmic I am, all that is. And during that moment, our Father, Mother, God inbreathe the whole of creation up the spiral of evolution to the next octave of our learning experience. And what is happening now is that we are in the midst of this shift of vibration. And we are responsible for transmuting our human miscreations that we created through expressing thoughts and feelings that weren't based in love, and transmuting those back into light so that we can move forward in the light. So this is a very unique moment on the planet, and every single person involved at this time, according to the legions of light in the higher realms, have been preparing for lifetimes to assist the planet. So we've all come in to our earthly experiences with various catalysts to help us remember. Most of us are using pain as our motivator. So in my experience, like so many other people, I came into a situation that reflected a lot of fear and pain in my own experience, and I witnessed that in the world. And from a very young age, I had this inner knowing that that was not the way life was supposed to be on this planet, and that there were ways that we could turn that around. We did not have to experience that level. So my motivating quest was to find out why in the world there's so much pain and suffering on the planet. So that took me through the gamut of world religions and through psychology and whatever I could get my hands on in the way of scientific discovery. And I became aware that there was this unique thread of truth running through all the information that indicated that at some level we are creating our own reality. And in ancient philosophies and Buddhism and ancient philosophies, it was indicating the laws of cause and effect. In Judaism, it was referred to as an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. We should have said an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hug for a hug, a kiss for a kiss. So we got the whole picture. In Christianity, it's casting our bread upon the water and having it returned to us. In the fields of science, it was like attracts like, action and reaction, radiation and magnetization. And in the fields of metaphysics, it was known as the law of the circle, or the out-breath and the in-breath of our Father, Mother, God. So my overwhelming question was, if every form of knowledge, both spiritual and academic, is telling us that we are creating our own realities through our thoughts, words, actions, and feelings, and our behavior, why in the world are we still in this mess? So I'd ask the spiritual leaders, and I usually got the response, it's because Eve ate that darned apple. That's what's created all this chaos in the outer world. And when I asked the scientific community, it was because matter evolves from chaos by happenstance, randomly, that there's no rhyme or reason for what's going on in the outer world. What is, just is. Well, none of those questions satisfied my questioning mind. So I begin to hear over and over in my meditations, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven within, and all else will be revealed to you. And so I began genuinely focusing on, in my meditations, that the answers were there. And that led me through a process that fulfills what everyone has talked about today so far, that we are multidimensional beings, and that we have a God self, a higher part of our consciousness that can easily connect and communicate with the beings of light in the realms of truth through open heart and mind telepathic communication. And this has nothing to do with being psychic or channeling or having special gifts or extra sensory supernatural abilities. It is the natural process that was always ours from the beginning, that we were never supposed to lose. And once we begin connecting with those realms of truth, the information that was shared from me from on high was life transforming. And my heart commitment was that if people just knew, or I should say remembered, our ability to connect with this sacred knowledge that would guide our lives, we could transform the world. And people know that at a level. We always hear people talk about being self-made men and self-made women. But the reality is we're all self-made men and self-made women, but it's only the successful ones that are willing to acknowledge that to a real level, giving themselves credit for that. So what our responsibility is now is connecting with the powers within us to transform our lives. And that information is readily available for each and every one of us now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, my next guest is Peter Anthony. Welcome, Peter.
Well, hello.
Hello. Peter was in the height of his television career with the CBS News Division when he died on November 11th, 1987 at 11:11 in operating room number 11. Several changes that occurred after Peter's death was the knowledge of ancient numerology, as well as psychic remote viewing, which not only enabled Peter to resolve unusual homicide cases, but would land him on the television show Sightings. This paranormal show launched Peter's new career as an international psychic detective and published author of Keymaster, inspired by his near-death experience. Peter's sequel to Keymaster is scheduled for release at the end of this year. Peter said, "Doctors gave me 3 months to live after an unsuccessful surgery on November 11th. I survived death not once but twice. I'm grateful to be alive and to share a message from the other side. Sometimes second chances give new meaning to life." Wow. Well, thank you again. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so very much.
And before we begin, for those who do not know, can you tell us briefly what a near-death experience is?
Well, for me, and so many of us who've had near-death experiences, we all have this, what I refer to as an exit point. An exit point doesn't necessarily have to be a near-death experience, meaning you clinically die. An exit point can be, that close call with a traffic accident or falling off a cliff and or even, an unsuccessful suicide. I mean, these things refer to as leaving the body, the physical body. So for me, my near-death experience was, and I have to address something here first before I go into this, because all the panelists thus far have spoken about their connection, and for the most part, and their childhood, and knowing there was a mission, something that they were here to do. Well, I'm kind of the complete opposite. I was agnostic. I didn't believe in any of this witchy-woo-woo stuff. I worked in the news division. I believe you live, you die, you kind of create your money reality, and get married, have kids, and have the house and the fence, and that was my reality. And so for me, I think I came into this new world of understanding, awareness, if you will, of kind of kicking and screaming. So for me, my near-death experience was something in itself built on certainly a tragic night on November the 11th, and but for me, I think the most amazing thing, and so many of us who've had these near-death experiences, it makes no difference if we have car accidents or a medical mishap. Again, I know a lady that was, stabbed many times and survived. But for so many of us who have these near-death experiences, the common denominator is simply this: when we do cross over and we go through that tunnel, that what I call the bullseye, that rotating tunnel of white light, there is this thing called peace and tranquility. There is this peace of acceptance. When you are spinning through this tunnel, you don't question, you don't doubt. The reality at that moment is you accept. And for me, having not believed much in anything other than my own selfish behavior and money and career status, for me, going through this tunnel, like so many of us, you come into this place of understanding, and you hear this over and over again, but this feeling of love, there is no way to describe, there are no words to describe the feeling of love that you experience on the other side. And so, going through this tunnel, I remember, and the only thing I can share with you guys and those who are listening to this is awestruck. and feeling something I had never felt before, and feeling a peace that I had never felt before. Imagine, sitting there oceanside, and you're having your cup of coffee early in the morning, and you're just sitting there relaxing and just enjoying the morning and enjoying the waves caress your feet and your ankles. Well, multiply that by 1,000,000 times. That is exactly what you feel. And one of the things that you learn as you're spinning through this tunnel of light and love, there is no judgment. There is no judgment. There is no categories of Muslims and Christians. There is no gay. There is no straight. There is no poor. There is no wealthy. There is spirit. And encased in that spirit is the essence of love. And that, to me, was the greatest message I learned on the other side. So near-death experience for me, the tunnel, the life review, introducing what I refer to as the conflicts of my life, what I should have done, could have done, didn't do, all those things were reviewed to me. And one of the things I learned, you guys, was that choice is one of the most powerful ingredients on this planet. Everything we do is based upon a choice. And I was able to see in this my own personal life review, if you will, my own dysfunctional realities and choices that I had made, with relationships, with career, with addiction. And so I was able to look down on these choices, and I don't remember which panelist brought up the thing about thought, but I could hear my thoughts while I was watching my life review, and how important our thoughts are, our consciously aware thoughts are. And so for me, I think, this thing called choice, I was given the choice to review my life, not with judgment, not to, oh, Peter, this was wrong, you should have done this, and look how bad you were. But, in my awareness, I knew that I could have done better. And if given the choice to go back, which I was, that I would do better. And so many, as I travel around this world, and speaking about my near-death experience, I think so many people think that they, and I don't like to use this word, but victims of their reality, victims of their career, of their lack of money. And I think for me, what I try to share with my audience is that we're all given the choice. You're given a choice to stay in a job. You're given a choice to be in a bad relationship or a good one. You're given the choice to be on this panel today and speak your truth as you know it. Everything is based on a choice. So once I began to understand and harness these awarenesses of love and my own internal power, I was able to release all these conflicts that I had inside and resolve. And one of those things that happened to me, you guys, is before going into my near-death experience, I stuttered. I had a speech impediment, not noticeable, but noticeable enough for on-camera and radio interviews. But so coming back, after being given the choice to come back, meaning God, universal knowledge, source, whatever you want to identify it with, I was given the choice. Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back? And having seen my life review and having seen that I no longer was going to stutter and seeing the conflicts I would face medically for year after year after year, yes, I wanted to go back. So choice for me, when I came back, the choice to live, the choice to really focus in on my life and not to listen to the opinions of others, but to listen to my heart instead and to start making wiser choices. So that was the main ingredient for me coming back. And again, I did not stutter when I came back. And the complications that I saw on the other side, I was blind. When I came back, due to all the medical complications, not only did I lose my vision, but I was in a wheelchair. So I couldn't walk and I couldn't see. And so I go back to this kicking and screaming and not believing, and then leaving this, if you will, this heavenly experience, this divine encounter with God's source, and coming back and given a 3-month sentence that I was going to die yet again.
Well, thank you so much. Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock. We only have a few minutes, so if we could 1 to 2 minutes for an answer now, if that's possible. So Diane, back to you. Part of your work is about pushing past the boundaries of our current perceptions of reality, of what we know and of what we can accomplish, so that we can make room for another reality, one that's based on the consciousness of oneness. What actions can one take to arrive at this new reality?
Thank you. Well, Nicholas Tesla once said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And everything is made up of energy. And when our own energies are vibrating at an elevated frequency, we begin to attune to and align with the true nature of our being, as well as the vast number of the beings that coexist with us on the planet, including those in the animal and nature kingdoms, and those in other multidimensional realms of existence throughout the interconnected oneness of an intelligent cosmos. We know that the physical life that we're living is not all there is. The world in which we live is part of a far greater whole. And part of the work we do with the Source of Synergy Foundation is creating synergy with all life. And we believe this will lead to deeper realizations of the vast cosmic richness that is at our disposal at all moments in our universe. And when we embody the higher frequencies and elevated vibrations, the next level of our evolution will be ushered in. And I believe in order for us to survive and thrive on the planet, we must partner more closely with the greater whole by creating a deeper field of connection and coherence among us. And this is part of the inherence of who we really are. We were never meant to be separate from the infinite life forms that exist on the planet and in other realms, frequencies, and locations in the cosmos. And living into this reality is an essential part of our evolutionary process. Last October, the Source of Synergy Foundation co-convened a synergy circle at the Finhorn Foundation on co-creating with the intelligence of nature. And some of you might have heard about how one of the founders of Finhorn, Dorothy McLean, was able to communicate with nature spirits when she followed their guidance on what the seeds needed to grow in very sandy soil. And the result was that she was able to grow extremely large vegetables, including giant 40-pound cabbages. And Finhorn soon became renowned for being able to communicate with and work with other forms of life, and have shown amazing results from that communication. And Dorothy knew that she had to go beyond limitations of the mainstream perception of reality, of what we know and what we can accomplish, to make room for another reality, and one that is based on the consciousness of oneness and collaboration with all life. And our planet, especially now, is in desperate need to form these type of deeper relationships with nature, animals, and those in the spirit world, so that we can work together as partners to help support personal, collective, and global healing and birth a new reality together. And recently, there's been a number of stories about how trees communicate with each other through an interconnected social network existing underground. And we have learned that, like humans, they are social and depend on each other for their survival. And I had a recent experience with the tree this past winter when I was sliding down an icy hill and almost went headfirst into a huge tree. And as I approached the tree, I felt a powerful force push me backwards so I wouldn't hit the tree. It was really remarkable. And science has always believed that trees competed with each other for sunlight and water and carbon and nutrients. But recently, we have learned that the trees are interdependent, cooperative, and pass down their wisdom for their next generation. And I know on that day in the forest, a tree did what it could to save me from harm. And I believe trees have great love for us and will do whatever they can in their power to protect us and keep us alive on the planet. So it's been particularly heartbreaking to see over the past few weeks the images of our beloved Amazon rainforest on fire, as well as fires in Bolivia, Indonesia, Siberia, Central Africa, Europe, and other places around the world. As we know, the Amazon basin alone is home to 1 billion indigenous peoples and about 3 million species of plants and animals. And it contains about 10% of the world's species, many of which are unadapted to widespread fire. So we know that we're losing a lot of animals, and this is very tragic. And the loss of this habitat. Also, as we know, our precious forests absorb millions of tons of carbon every year, which is critical to regulating climate change. And their generosity is helping us to stay alive. And when trees are cut and burned for agriculture, timber, cattle ranching, and mining, the carbon that is being stored is released into the atmosphere, and the rainforest capacity to absorb carbon is reduced. And at a time when the world needs billions more trees to absorb carbon and stabilize the climate, the planet is losing a large portion of its biggest rainforest. And one of the reasons why Brazil is burning is because the world eats so much meat. Brazil is the world's largest exporter of beef. Cattle ranching accounts for up to 80% of deforestation in the Amazon. And just in closing, one important step we can take to protect the forests and slow down climate change is to become vegan. Adopting a vegan diet, I know, Karen, you're vegan, is one of the greatest ways we can reduce our impact on the planet. Researchers at the University of Oxford found that cutting meat and dairy products from your diet can reduce an individual's carbon footprint from food by up to 73%. And a few other everyday choices we can make, like choose environmentally responsible products, reduce paper and wood consumption, read ebooks, get paper statements. We can support indigenous populations by buying indigenous fair trade products and supporting groups like the Rainforest Action Network and the World Wildlife Fund. And finally, in honor of the consciousness of oneness, let's do all that we can to have a conscious, intentional relationship with nature and all those in the animal kingdom and subtle worlds. And in order to do so, we must work on vibrating at elevated frequencies so that we can attune to and align more consciously in the field that connects us all. And once we are in this frequency, we can more easily connect with all life, whether it's with the nature and nature spirits in your garden, like Dorothy did, connecting with the forest, like in the Amazon, that's in need of your support, or with a neighborhood dog. We're all part of this big web of life. Let's listen deeply to what others in this web are saying and communicate with them on a regular basis. We can offer them our love, compassion, our prayers, our solidarity, our commitment to spreading greater awareness about an issue and to changing some of our day-to-day habits. If we do so, we will create greater harmony among all life in the web. So let's be mindful that whenever we breathe out, the plants and trees are taking this breath in. And whenever we take a breath in, plants and trees are taking this breath out. And we are continuously exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide. We are breathing together as one, sharing the breath of life and keeping each other alive. So remembering this exchange will help us enter into a more vibrant and alive reality, one where we fully feel and live global oneness in every moment. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you so much. Now, if the rest of you, I'm going to ask you a question. If you could answer it in 2 sentences, and I know I'll tell you the question. If you had one thing you could tell people what they could do to make this planet a better place, what would it be?
Okay, to keep the planet pure is to hold forth from your very heart the realization of the oneness of all life, knowing that every moment, with every breath we take, whatever we are empowering with our thoughts and feelings is either adding to the light of the world or the shadows. So if we will daily and hourly monitor our thoughts and feelings and express them through the power of divine love, we can transform the planet.
Perfectly said. Thank you. Sister Jenna?
I was just saying, keep your thoughts pure. Mm-hmm. Check if your thoughts are giving sorrow to anyone, and also check if your thoughts are taking sorrow from anyone.
Beautiful. And Peter, how about you?
I think I'm going to keep it very simple. For me, I'm here to promote a culture of peace, both at home and here abroad. And I'm trying to address in all my lectures the root causes, not just the symptoms, of why we and this planet are in such a violent place. And I think it's my job, our job, to transform our culture, our thoughts, our thinking, and to teach the truest form of peace.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for being with us today and for everything that you're doing to raise the vibration of our beautiful planet. You are amazing.
Thank you.
You really are. It was such an amazing panel. And thank you for the listeners who have joined us here today. Remember, the energy of who you are is what is real. It doesn't begin and it doesn't end. Those on the panel know this without a doubt. And our wish is for you to know it too. Now let's take this a step further. We are divine beings of love and light who can create amazing miracles in our lives and in the world as well. The only difference between miracle workers and those who are not are that the miracle workers know who they are. They remember who they are. So let's remember who we are. And together, we could raise the vibration of our glorious planet back to its true state of perfection. We, all of us, are the ones that we've been waiting for. When we turn on our light, the darkness will simply go away. Thank you again for joining us here for a Global Oneness Day Spirituality panel. Namaste. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities Team, and welcome to Global Oneness Day, everyone. This program is called Impulse of the Soul. During this program, we emphasize connection to our higher self, or some call it our soul, as an expression of our true nature. When we tap into our divine essence at the center of our being and live our most authentic life, we follow our passions, inspirations, and intuitions without fear or hesitation, which we understand is our soul's guidance. We know there is nothing to fear by expressing our true nature in a state of loving compassion for all, while honoring who we truly are. This panel will discuss how we connect with the impulse of our soul in each moment so we don't veer from what we hold to be true. I'm going to introduce you to our panel now. I'm going to briefly introduce them one at a time, and then we'll go right into panel discussion. Michael Bernard Beckwith is the founder and spiritual director of Agape International Spiritual Center in Los Angeles, California. He is a featured teacher in the film and book, The Secret. In the 70s, he began an inward journey into the teachings of East and West. And today he teaches universal truth principles found in New Thought ancient wisdom traditions of spirituality. He is the founder of Agape International Spiritual Center, co-founder of Association for Global New Thought, AGNT, and the co-chair of the Season for Nonviolence. Gifted with a vision of trans-denominational spiritual community, he speaks to a congregation of more than 9,000 people weekly at the Agape International Spiritual Center. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Michael.
Thank you so much. It's my joy to be with all of you.
Great to have you with us. And Mathew Fox is a prolific author of books that are renewing the ancient tradition of creation spirituality. This tradition is feminist, welcoming of the arts and artists, wisdom-centered, prophetic, and caring about eco-justice, social justice, and gender justice. Fox's efforts to reawaken the West to its own mystical tradition has included reviving awareness of Hildegard of Bingen, Meister Eckhart, and the mysticism of Thomas Aquinas, as well as interacting with contemporary scientists who are also mystics. He believes that by reinventing work, education, and worship, we can bring about a nonviolent revolution on our planet, and has committed himself to this vision for many years, recently by setting out 95 theses for a new reformation of Christianity. Welcome to Global Oneness Day, Mathew.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be with you all.
And Thomas Hübl is a modern mystic, a spiritual teacher whose work integrates the core insights of the great wisdom traditions with the discoveries of contemporary science. Illuminating with his profound understanding, Thomas's teachings offer a unique approach for living as a mystic in the marketplace of human activity. His work combines semantic awareness practices, advanced meditative practices, a sophisticated analysis of cultural architecture, and transformational processes that address trauma and shadow issues. His teachings aim to guide practitioners toward a deeper level of self-awareness from an ego-centered worldview to a life of authentic expression, service, and alignment. And welcome to Global Oneness Day, Thomas.
Thank you, Steve, for having me. Thank you.
Okay, and last, certainly not least, Lynne McTaggart is an international best-selling author and a dynamic inspirational speaker who is consistently voted one of the top 100 spiritual leaders for her groundbreaking work with consciousness and the power of intention. She's chiefly known for the quality of writing and in-depth research and her books, The Field, The Intention Experiment, and The Bond. All international sensations, and now in 30 languages, are considered seminal classics of the new science. She's also architect of the Intention Experiment, a global laboratory involving thousands of readers around the world, testing the power of group thoughts to heal the world, which Dan Brown featured by name in The Lost Symbol. Lynne will be joining us a little later in the program. Okay, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's start right in. And panel, as we mentioned just a moment ago, when you respond to questions, feel free to respond to panel discussion in addition to the questions that I ask. We'd love to hear the things that you most want to share. And Michael, I'm going to direct the first question to you. How do we get in touch with our soul's impulse? How do we distinguish between this and our mental, emotional mind?
Well, basically, beyond job, beyond career, there's a calling that each of us has as living souls. The soul obviously contains tremendous wisdom, knowledge, creative intelligence. And so the obvious way is meditation, in which we begin to activate our spiritual faculties with the awareness that our eyes are prosthetics of insight and our ears are prosthetics of our ability to hear the invisible. Through spiritual practices, we begin to activate our spiritual faculty that allows us to see the invisible, to hear the inaudible, beyond the sensorium. The way to be involved in the passion of our soul or the calling of our soul is to live perennially with a question. Oftentimes people are living in disempowering questions. You know, what's wrong, who's to blame, what's wrong with the world, etc. I think we need to begin to ask, what's trying to emerge in my life? What gift am I to give? What am I to share? And I think when we live in that kind of question, answers will emerge through us, and we will learn to discern those answers. We'll learn to hear with the ear that's beyond the ear, and we'll learn to see with the eye that is beyond the physical eye. And that calling, that impulse of the soul will begin to be more real to us. When we're in the sea of mental garbage and asking disempowering questions, we get caught up with our emotional content. We get caught up with egoic structures. We get caught up with the hypnotism of the world. But through spiritual practice, we learn to discern between the two, that there is a passion, there is a calling, there is a right and a reason for us to be here as distinct, individualized expressions of pure awareness itself. And this does not come about through happenstance. It comes about through intentionality and through spiritual practice, and by living in an empowering question as a part of our practice, as a part of our daily lives. That's the first feeling I get when you ask me that question.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Michael, for setting the table here so well. So Mathew, I'm going to come over to you. You followed your soul's impulse your whole life, even at the cost of offending the Catholic Church years ago that many know about. This must have required great courage on your part. Can you share a little bit about your life experience, including what must have been a very difficult decision that you made earlier in your career?
Well, thank you, Steve. I want to pick up on your theme of courage, and to me that flows from Michael's wise discourse as well, because to live spiritually in the world takes courage. And the word courage is two French words, cœur, large, a big heart. So it comes down to, how do we grow our hearts? How do we make our hearts large and stand up for what we believe in, and take those journeys, sometimes into the dark, that are very, scary. And one way to expand the heart is joy. Thomas Aquinas says, joy expands the heart. Fear shrinks the heart. We go like this when we're afraid. But when you're joyful, you're expansive. You want to share. You want to celebrate. Joy of its nature wants to give away. It's generous. Joy is generous. So that's what the mystics call the via positiva, getting in touch with awe, wonder, and joy. Another way that we grow courage is when the heart breaks. That's the via negativa. Joanna Macy, the Buddhist teacher, says that when your heart breaks, the whole universe can break through, can pour through. So heartbreak, too, going into the darkness, what the mystics call the dark night of the soul. Today, I think as a species, we're in a collective dark night, the dark night of our species. This is a place where our souls can grow. We can't run from it. We ought not to run from it, to submit to all the addictions of flight that our culture pours on us daily, but to be present. We need that warrior energy to be present to the darkness, to the grief of the world, to the grief of Mother Earth, to the grief of feeling the Amazon burning at this time, for example. And then the via creativa is when we put our experience of love and joy into, and of suffering and emptying, into moral imagination. Because that's the step from going to the inner work to the outer work. The creativity is the bridge from the inner to the outer, and that demands a strength too. And then finally, the via transformativa is about the work of justice and compassion, healing and celebration. That is the culmination of our spiritual journeys. And of course, this too takes courage. And I think the best way to learn courage is by hanging out with courageous people. And I'll give you a couple examples. Fred Shuttlesworth was one of the leaders of was the leader of the civil rights movement in Birmingham, Alabama. Unlike King, he was not educated. He was a street guy and poor, but he was King's right-hand man in Birmingham. He's the one who convinced King to fill the jail with teenagers, because he says the adults are going to lose their jobs after being in jail a month. We got to keep the jails full, but fill them with teenagers. King didn't want to do it, but he relented. He went along with it. He relented and went along with Fred's idea. Well, make long story short, I was invited to do a workshop with Fred years ago on the topic of racism and ecology. He was like 81 at the time. He was taking on this whole new theme. And before we went public speaking, we were having a lunch together, sharing a sandwich. And I said to him, Fred, where do you get your courage? Because Fred was beaten 3 times by the Ku Klux Klan with chains. His house was blown up by the Ku Klux Klan. The whole roof came in. He was in it, but he walked away pretty okay. And his 2 children were arrested by the sheriff and put in jail at 8 and 10 years old. So that was my pressing question to Fred, where do you get your courage? And he said to me, well, you can call it courage, but I don't. I call it trust. So I think trust is the basis for courage. And one more example, Sister Dorothy Stang, who was a student of mine, she got assassinated, really martyred, 14 years ago in the Amazon, defending the very same rainforest and the peasant farmers and indigenous people that are being threatened still now in Brazil. And she was advised, because she was a leader, that her life was in danger. And her family wanted to come home and all the rest. But after she left our program, she went back to Brazil and she said, I must stay with these peasant people. They are my people. And if we lose the forest, we lose everything. They have a sacrosanct right to a dignified life and work, and I am with them. And she was gunned down one day by 3 men hired by a plantation owner. And she just had time before they came out of the woods. She was alone. She pulled her Bible out of her backpack and started to read the Beatitudes, and they gunned her down right there on the spot. At her funeral, at her memorial service, one of the peasant farmers got up and he said, Sister Dorothy, we're not burying you, we are planting you. So that's another concrete story of courage. And it's about having the strength, the inner strength, to put a noble cause before one's own ego survival, if you will, or indeed one's life. And Jesus spoke to that when he said, greater love than this has no person than to lay down their life for their friends. So what I'm saying is that courage is everywhere, but we have to call on it. And circumstances today, I think, are requiring a lot more courage from people. And we shouldn't think that it's in these great heroes who we put on pedestals. It's a power within all of us, this capacity to grow our hearts. Meister Eckhart says, God is delighted to watch our souls enlarge. So we're here to grow our hearts and our souls. And I think these pathways of joy, of breaking open, of suffering, of darkness, of creativity, of the call, like Michael was talking about, the call, the vocation to stand up and be counted today in this crisis in which we're living. I think all this makes us all more courageous.
Yeah, wow, beautiful again. And so courage and what Michael was bringing in earlier, what is unseen, which is trust, faith in our soul's calling. So beautiful. So Thomas, I'm going to come over to you here. You were a student of medicine and science, but decided to leave this academic pursuit to deeply meditate, I believe, for a period of years that led you to the work that you're doing now. So can you talk a little bit about this? Certainly this is another example of following our soul's impulse.
Yes. First of all, I don't want to repeat. I mean, many beautiful things have been shared already that I resonate with deeply. Like on the one hand, what Michael said is also what is deep motivation and what is creativity. So when I loved medicine, and there was a growing, it's kind of a little bit the unseen. There was a growing tendency in me that's great, but that's not fully it. And so in a way, there was something in me that listened to a deeper or another voice inside. And that voice grew until eventually when I was 26, I went on a 4-year meditation retreat, but I felt that something is calling me. And I believe that's a little bit also what Michael referred to, that it's kind of, it also requires that we listen to it. And it was against my social and my family conditioning. And so it kind of, there was something that also, I think Mathew mentioned, that it needs courage to follow it. And so, and maybe in order not to repeat this and to keep it also a bit shorter, I think one element that is important is that the soul is not, like sometimes we might think of the soul as a cognitive thing or a thing, whereas you ask the question, it's an impulse. What is the soul's impulse? And it's a movement. And it seems like that one expression of the divine is an unfolding creativity, and our soul's movement is one expression of that, like a leaf on a tree that opens up. And I think like getting realigned, which is also basically a deep function of healing, is restoring the original movement. So when we heal something, like something that has been stagnant or in stagnation, starts to come back online and restores its original movement. And I believe that we all come, when we listen to our soul's impulse, we strengthen the part that is moving, that is creative, that is deeply motivated, passionate, courageous. And it also gives us the resources, as Mathew said, that when there are times where we feel heartbroken or when we run into difficulties, that we are willing to face them. And I think that's another function of the soul, is that which is facing challenges and integrating them and uploading them as a strengthening of the soul. I often compare this to the barcode reader. When you go to the supermarket and you buy a bottle of milk and it goes, "Deet." And so every time we face a challenge that we actually integrate and move through, our wisdom also grows. So the capacity of our soul also gets stronger. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you all for bringing in your personal stories. And actually, Michael, if I can come over to you on your personal story, because it also was similar. You were, as I understand it, you were a pre-med student when you decided to move in this other direction, ultimately becoming an ordained minister in religious science, and then going on and founding Agape and doing these other important things that you're doing now. What can you talk a little bit about that and your own journey of courage and faith?
Absolutely. I attended Morehouse College primarily because that's the alma mater of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. While I was in Morehouse College, I founded the Harriet Tubman Prison Committee, in which we were advocating rights for the prisoners to have equal pay and things of this particular nature. And then I moved back to Los Angeles. I was also a part of the Black Workers Congress. We worked with the Black Panther Party. I moved back to Los Angeles, and in between the time of going back to school, I was working with these organizations to try to revolutionarily change the world by any means necessary. And I was sitting in a meeting, and someone behind me said, if you were to take over the world tomorrow, would it be any different? So I turned behind me, there was nobody there. We continued with the meeting, and then the question came up again, but it was coming from inside of me. If we were to take over the world tomorrow, would it be any different? So I looked around the room, and I could see the pathology of the ego in the room. I could see territorialism, I could see one-upsmanship, I could see having to be right. I could see all of this pathology in the room of these great beings who wanted to change the world. And I realized the world was not going to be any different. It was a different ideology, but there was nothing else. And at that time, I didn't have anything to put with it. And so I didn't go back to that meeting. The very next week, someone in that meeting shot someone. They got into an argument and they shot someone. And I wasn't there to be a part of that whole legal thing that occurred. And so I went back to school. I enrolled in USC. It's a psychobiology major, pathway to med school. And I began to have a series of inner experiences that at the time I labeled pathological. I didn't understand them. Seeing things, hearing voices, astral traveling, all manner of things were going on, but I had studied none of this material, so I kept it to myself, thinking that one day it would go away and I would be normal again. And it culminated with a death in a lucid dream. I was stabbed in my heart and I died. When I woke up from that, I could see that we were surrounded by a presence that at the time I called love beauty. The love was so intense and the beauty was well beyond description, and it shifted the trajectory of my life. And so I began to pursue a meditation. I would go on meditation retreats for long periods of time, study. And then I began to be aware of the mystical traditions that were in all religions, that were universal, and that no religion had any monopoly on mysticism or truth. And so my path changed. It was not like I made a decision. It was like something happened, something opened within me, and I had to discover what had happened. So my path became what happened to me. Why am I seeing life differently? When I came out of this awareness, I could see that people were struggling, they were in fear, people were thinking about money and this type of thing, and none of that was important to me. This presence was so real and continues to be so real to me that it shifted everything in my life. And then one thing after another led me to become a spiritual therapist, and then a minister, and then I left the United Church and became an independent spiritual community, and that continues to grow. So in that way, I was following the calling, the impulse. There's so many choices I had to make that didn't seem logical at all. At one point, I had a job. I worked for the federal government. I ran a Census Bureau office for the city of Compton. And it was the first time that we had achieved a level of excellence. And people came in from Washington, D.C. to see what I was doing, and I had set up affirmation booths and meditation booths, and I changed the whole thing into this spiritual program to go get the census. And it changed people's lives. People went back to school, and the federal government, they wanted to hire me to go around and to work with other departments. And at the same time, I was offered a position to run a prayer ministry. And the money that I was being offered from the federal government was way more than what I was being offered to run this prayer ministry. It was very clear to me that my dharma, my next step, was in the spiritual direction. So I took the job that was paying hardly nothing and left the job on the table that was paying a lot more money with my own car, traveling around the United States, because the calling in me to be of service at that level was so strong and so real that I knew that my needs would be met. I didn't know how they would be met, but I knew they would be met. So the trajectory shifted from a pre-med to real healing, just following the dictates of my soul. And I remember having a mystical experience in a statistics class. Math was not always easy for me. I remember, getting C's and just getting by with the class. And then one day something happened. This is the same year all this phenomena was happening. And all of a sudden, the statistics, it opened up, and it was like art. It was a pathway to order. And all of a sudden, I saw it. And I remember my grades shot up. The teacher saying, well, what happened? And I couldn't explain it, other than I was seeing things differently. But I couldn't explain what had happened. So there was an order that I was tapping into. So subsequently, that was my last year of school. Subsequently, I followed my path to, what I get to do today. It's more than a choice. It's like I have no choice. This is who I am. This is what I do. I'm always available to do insights and revelations and the articulation of ageless wisdom for whoever it is I'm speaking to. So it wasn't like a decision. It was more like something happened. I have to explore this. And then the exploration of that, my destiny unfolded.
Wow. What a story. Thank you, Michael. So how do you how do you invite, of course, you're as you mentioned, you're not only agape, but you're flying all around the world all the time, talking to people, mentoring, coaching, etc. How do you invite people to follow the impulse of their soul? Because maybe some of these people have the incredible mystical experiences such as what you have, but where I'm guessing you probably grab people out of seats, most days of the week. How does your process work?
Basically, I throw myself open, and whatever the topic is, whatever I'm teaching on, it's a feeling tone. It kind of takes me over, and people get kind of activated by the energy coming through me. And the words are carriers of energy. The words are carrier of an activation. And so I seek to take things that seem to be very complicated and simplify them in bite-sized pieces. And people are feeling that they already know what I'm saying, because on a soul level, they already know what I'm saying. So I try to access it in a way that they come to an awareness that they already know this, and then try to invite individuals to, one, embrace the unfoldment of their soul. As Thomas was indicated, there's an unfolding taking place. There's already a perfect idea within us. We don't create that. We didn't create ourselves. There's an idea there. So I try to encourage them to be a part of their own participation in their own unfoldment, and then find their place in the world to share their giftedness and their talents and their capacities. Everyone has something to give. Everyone has something to share. Everyone has a gift. Everyone has something. There are no mistakes in the universe. The presence did not do do-overs, did not repeat itself, and never made any mistakes. So I seek to encourage people to really introspect until they can transpect. They go beyond introspection into seeing differently. And, so I bring about the vision process and things of that particular nature. And, obviously, most of the time, and I guess all three of us could speak to this, when you go out to speak, the people are already, they wouldn't show up if they didn't have some level of interest. So you're speaking to a level of interest already. The interest is already peaked, or they already have a practice. So a community develops that strengthens our practice, our encouragement, our stick-to-itiveness to keep on working on ourselves and basically to bring people to an understanding at this point in history. I think Mathew alluded to this, is that we're not sitting just for our own spiritual enlightenment at this stage of humanity. We're basically sitting for all sentient beings. We're sitting for the liberation of humanity. We're sitting as Mathew was saying, where it's a dark night of the soul happening, but there's also a renaissance happening at the same time. And so we want to call our attention to the fact there is a dark night, there's a decadence, there's paradigms that are dying right in front of us, but at the same time there's an emergence and there's a renaissance occurring. And so we want to bring our attention to acknowledging the evil, acknowledging the decadence, and paying attention to where the new energy is rising of love and of courage and generosity and compassion and forgiveness, and to be about that, ambassadors of that energy to the best of our ability, and see where it takes us individually and collectively. So the days of just sitting and contemplating for your own liberation are over. It's about, what am I to be about? Where's my calling taking me in this moment where something is dying and something is emerging? And I want to be a part of that emergent energy. What does that look like for me? And I'm not an activist Nazi, meaning everybody's not to do the same thing, but we're all to do something. There's something we're all called to do, or we would not have incarnated at this time in human history. So I seek to bring people to that kind of understanding and then make a choice and a decision. Choice and decision are not the same thing. Incision means to cut something away. You have to cut away something. Choice is a function of expanded awareness. So between choice and decision, I seek to help people start to walk in the direction of their own calling, transmuting the inertia to momentum. And then they find community in that, and encouragement, and enjoy, great joy. If you're not in joy, you're not in integrity with your soul. And if you're not in bliss, you're not in integrity with your soul. There's a joy and a bliss that's independent of circumstances. And when we walk in that direction, we feel more of it.
Amen. Yeah, and that siren in the background's telling us time to walk in joy. Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. And Thomas, I know you share that trauma and shadow are often obstacles to following the impulse of our soul. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, it's beautiful to listen to Michael and also what Mathew said before, because I think that on the one hand we have that empowerment through the kind of creative movement or what's unfolding, and I think it's very powerful that when you look at healing, you also see that even finding a right therapist or a right healer or somebody that can really help us, or a teacher, is actually the resonance of our soul. And Michael said this in a way, if people are already resonant and coming to a kind of an event or a talk, there is already something in resonance, and we speak to that resonance and it makes it stronger. And then the group, like to do this as a we, makes it more and stronger. So there's something building, there like a resource. But my experience is also that, and also I think the whole trauma science shows us more and more how trauma is really something for us to understand and see how we can integrate that which is painful and was so painful that it has been split off, so that our spiritual practice can actually be a resource in that healing movement and help us to really look at it. And so I believe one element of the power of our soul is also the courage to deal with that which was overwhelming at earlier times in our life. And I think the only danger that I see is that it will try to do exactly what we or our nervous system does in overwhelming situation, is kind of dissociate or cut something off, and that we are trying to get away from the difficulties instead of getting resourced somewhere, like exactly how Michael described it. It was a beautiful description also of following one's passion and listening, and then following the ongoing inner guidance. I found this a beautiful description. I had a very similar experience. And But on the other hand, also to see that we are not trying to get away into like a super clean world, but that we are willing to look at the things that need to be looked at in order to become whole. And so that our development is really sustainable, and not that the hounds or the bloodhounds are constantly running after us and we are trying to feel good. And I think that if we combine those two, then the spiritual dimension is a very powerful resource for individual healing. And I believe like a phenomenon that we see more and more rising is that the collective dimension of traumatization is coming more into humanity's awareness. On the one hand, through the rise of technology, the speeding up of data, and on the other hand, through many, many people that are kind of on the path, that are waking up to a different consciousness. And it helps us to see that actually we all have been born into a more or less traumatized world. And we don't know that traumatized world taught us a lot about life. And so my nervous system and many, many parts of my conditioning might be trained by something that I don't even know that I'm living in, because it's so normal. And I believe that's something that I see is important to be connected also to our spiritual journey, that these worlds come together and create a real kind of unification. So yes, I do see the healing part as a necessary part for many people, and also one that shows what Mathew spoke to, the courage to also face that and not try to get away from it.
Yes, never a good idea. What we resist persists. So, not a good idea. Thank you, Thomas. So, Mathew, what are other things that get in the way of following the impulse of our soul?
Well, first I want to celebrate the wisdom from Michael and from Thomas. One story Michael told, or a phrase he used a couple of times in his own story, was about something happened to him and he wanted to explore it. What went on there? What happened to me? That named exactly what happened to me when I was a teenager and I was 16, and I read Tolstoy's War and Peace. And I told a friend, it blew my soul wide open. That's the language I used. And I wanted to explore what happened to me. Now, of course, I have language, a mystical experience, but I didn't have that language then. But it's because of that exploration that I went into the Dominican order as a young man. I had been raised Catholic, and I was, Dominicans were my parish priests, and I liked the fact that they had a long history of mysticism and intellectual life and so forth. But when it comes to calling or vocation, I just kind of want to make that connection with Michael's language and experience too. That's why I went into the calling that I did. And then, as you alluded to in the introduction, I had a few bumps along the way. Like after 34 years in the Dominican order, I got bumped. I got thrown out because I did stand up for women and for indigenous people and for the earth and for original blessing as opposed to original sin. So I just kind of wanted to make that connection because I felt Michael's language there was, well, it just rang a bell with me for sure. But as to other obstacles, yeah, I'm glad that Thomas is naming the whole issue of trauma. And what he said about sometimes we're born into trauma and we don't even know it because this is a world we're born into. I think there's a trauma in our country, obviously, that is eating away at our souls. You know, we talk about the war on drugs, and after someone wants to build a wall to keep Central Americans out and all this. But why don't we get down the real question and ask, why are North Americans so eager to buy drugs? We're the ones keeping the cartels in business. What's wrong with our souls? What's missing in our souls? They're so hungry for drugs. And that's not the only drug we're hungry for. We're hungry for constant consumerism, for more and more goods, and for more and more beefsteaks. There are so many addictions that we're fed by our culture that, just like Thomas says, we're born into this bubble, so we think it's normal or natural, but it isn't. Now, I give Pope Francis great credit for his critique of greed and of our economic system, Wall Street and all. We're born into it. We think this is normal and natural, but really, who says it's normal and natural? In fact, it's destroying the planet. And it builds on this weakness that all humans have, which is greed, the idea that we can always need more. But the earth is finite, and we can't always need more. We have to shift entirely our view of the world in that regard, and to learn to live more simply. I mean, this forest fire raging in the Amazon is not by accident. It's human beings setting these fires to do what? To tear down the forest, to grow cattle, because so many people in North America and other places want to eat beef on a regular basis. So this raises big questions about our diets. The diet is something we're born into. We take it for granted. Oh, yeah, that, we're all carnivores. But as the planet is trying to show us by her suffering, we have to take stock and look deeper and ask the bigger question. When Tom's both talking about, why are we here? And whom are we here to serve? And what is our deeper calling today? So I think, for example, I heard an amazing talk recently by an engineer, actually, from India who works in Silicon Valley. But he's devoted his life to trying to save the planet as we know it. And his point was this: if we could cut way back on livestock, the land that we use for livestock, we could grow trees. And in 10 years of planting trees, we could not just stop global warming, we could reverse it. We could reverse global warming. And he said, I'm an engineer, I've done my math on this, I have this correct. But to do this, we'd have to, he thinks, all switch to a vegan diet. Or there are, of course, other versions. There's vegetarianism, there's less meat. The point is, though, that if we could be, he says, 1 trillion more trees, there are 3 trillion trees on the planet today. We need 1 trillion more, which we humans have been cutting down for tens of thousands of years. So if we could do this, we could actually stop and reverse global warming. But that has everything to do with our diet. So that's an obstacle. It's just what Thomas was talking about. We're born into this world that we take for granted. Now, denial is another issue. I can't believe that in America today, a whole political party is in public denial about global warming. I mean, it's incredible. And why is that? Well, frankly, it's because of our economic system, that we don't want to, some people don't want to rattle the cages of the financiers who are financing their political careers or their judgeships or whatever it is that they're invested in. And so all of this awakening has to happen because Thomas is right. We're born into now a traumatized world. And some people don't even know it. And so that's what spirituality is. It's about waking up. Kabir, the wonderful 15th century Indian mystic, India, he said, in one of his poems, he says, "You've been sleeping for millions and millions of years. Why not wake up this morning?" So I think the very crisis, the dark night of our species that we're in today, is a tremendous invitation to wake up. And of course, time is running out. Science has told us we have 10 years left to change our ways in a deep way. And this is why spirituality is so important. And like Michael talked about this too, and so did Thomas, that spirituality goes deep. And it hits you at a place where you can't deny. And that's what's needed today. There has to be spirituality and science and creativity, all hands on deck. And all our powers as a species have to be brought to the table here. And of course, another part of spirituality is ritual that allows us to heal, to get through the trauma, to do the grieving. It's so important that we grieve today and have rituals for grieving, because everyone is in grief. But very few people know how to deal with their grief other than maybe see a psychiatrist, but that eliminates 95% of the people on the planet who can't afford a psychiatrist. So we need grieving practices that allow us to go deep into the traumas that are affecting us all. And is all this possible? Of course it's possible. We're an amazingly creative species. Our ancestors survived through very, very difficult times at times, and there's resilience in our species. But clearly, we're at a particular time, and just like Michael said, everyone on the planet today is here for a reason. Whether you're 80 or 18, you have a call to be generous, to be courageous, and to go into the dark and into our powers of creativity and giving birth to new forms of economics, new forms of education, new forms of religion that get the job done.
Yeah, wow. Mathew, thank you. So all these personal stories and wisdom you all are sharing has certainly created just an amazing panel. Next, you will hear from Lynne McTaggart, who will be coming to this Impulse of the Soul panel. And welcome, Lynne McTaggart, to Global Oneness Day. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Steve.
All right, and we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's just jump right in here. And Lynne, my first question for you, can you share how you followed your soul's impulse? You've certainly journeyed the road less traveled, creating new science research, becoming the architect of the intention experiment, and standing against industries in some cases that have come after you.
Well, you know, this has all happened by, there's a wonderful Yiddish word I like to use to describe my life, which is verblunget, which means kind of getting lost and, you know, and finding your way in, you know, in the road less traveled, as you say. And I mean, I'm an investigative reporter by background. So my work is really all about investigating and studying the science and the facts and the evidence. And it was really in that pursuit of why something like homeopathy and spiritual healing works that I got into all of this. And it was just an amazing, happy accident. But I recognized when I started researching for what became the field that I had stumbled upon the new science, a new science in the process of creation, and that all of these scientists were discovering extraordinary truths that were going to completely change how we view the world. So that discovery, I guess, changed the messenger. And it's always my investigative instincts that lead me to the next big thing. So from doing the field, I started thinking about intention, and there'd been a lot of things written about intention, you know, and movies like The Secret. And essentially it was all about I want, I get. And I wondered, being the hard-nosed reporter that I am at heart, you know, is it that simple? And, you know, what can we do with this? Can we cure cancer with our thoughts? You know, how powerful is this? And moving on from there, what happens if lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time? Does that magnify the effect? So that inquiry became the intention experiment. And then in playing with large groups intending, I started thinking about what happens when we shrink this down? What if we do small groups of 8? You know, can we heal people in groups? And it was, again, the happy accident of that really brought out the power of 8. I mean, I never expected that not only would these groups be powerful healing forces, but they would change the senders. And with the intention experiment, I never expected that, first of all, we'd have much of an effect, and we had a huge effect of 33 experiments to date. 29 have shown measurable positive and mostly significant effects. And that's when lots of people all over the world are just focusing on a target, usually on my website or YouTube when I'm broadcasting live. So that was extraordinary to me. And so all of these discoveries have always been kind of interesting, happy accidents that have changed me as I've gone along. And the biggest change has been having to accept miracles, you know, the miracles that happen in large-scale intention experiments, not just with the target, but also the intenders. And for me, also the final question you asked about coming up against big, the big establishments and, fighting against the green. Well, that's what I do. I've been a campaigner, I guess, from the time I started working, as well as a writer. That's been a very important element to me, to right wrongs. And that, I suppose, that impulse has been very important in this kind of spiritual work, because I felt that it needed to be uncompromising. I needed to provide the facts and evidence for what spiritual traditions have felt for centuries.
Wow. So the impulse of your soul, what I'm hearing, Lynn, is truth, following truth, which was your background as an investigative reporter.
Yeah, finding out truth, and oftentimes unorthodox truth. I gravitate toward what I like to call the Maginot Line between, hard material fact and spirituality. So I'm drawn to subjects like near-death experiences and, life after death, and all of those big questions. I've always been drawn to that, but always tried to bring, scientific evidence to that. And so I would say there are two impulses to my soul's journey. One is truth and the other is hope. Yeah. I think one of the big aspects of what I've tried to do with our work with What Doctors Don't Tell You, the international magazine I edit, is to provide alternative treatments that work for people who need healing. And that to me is really important. These ineffable ideas about hope, and there being hope for not only individuals, but also the planet, is really the cornerstone of the intention experiment too.
Wow.
When we get together, we heal the world and we heal ourselves.
Yes, and that's a great segue into my next question, which is about oneness. That you've been. We come across people, Lynn, globally, who share that this whole illusion of separation versus oneness, that you were the one, you were the door opening device that really brought clarity to, oh my God, that we're actually all not separate, that we actually are all one, and oneness is where hope is one of the areas where hope comes from, isn't it? Because there's a lot to be hopeful for when we understand what ultimate reality really is.
Well, I think, again, oneness has been a real cornerstone of the 4 books I've written in this area. I mean, of course, the main aspect of the field, and the thing that really changed me so much, was understanding that we aren't these separate and isolated entities existing in this lonely planet and lonely universe, but we're all interconnected by this quantum energy field. And that essentially on its own changes everything. But then we started playing around with oneness. What happens when we're all thinking the same thing at the same time? Well, we do enter this extraordinary state that can change reality, and we've shown that with these 33 intention experiments. Everything from making seeds grow faster to purifying water, to lowering violence in war-torn or violent areas. We've done 7 peace intention experiments. Every single one has shown a lowering of violence and healing someone of post-traumatic stress disorder. But what's been even more interesting to me is not the effect on the targets, but the effect on the participants. We found that act of coming together in oneness changes the messengers, changes the senders, where they not only experience healings, we've had thousands of healings that I've documented by carefully surveying the participants, but also they have healed polarization, which is my latest work. I did an intention experiment in the Middle East last year, and it was amazing because we had technology enabling us to hook up to 10 different locations. So we hooked up to audiences in 9 different Arab cities. So there were people from all over the Gulf states, plus an audience of Israeli Jews. And together we put an intention out there to heal violence in a violent area of the old city of Jerusalem. So there were some interesting effects afterward, but the biggest effect was with this technology, everybody could talk to everybody else. So the audiences of Arabs started talking to me and the Jews and saying, my God is your God. And the Jews were saying things like, we love you, sister. And everybody was crying. And I mean, this was a group of the most polarized and hated populations by the other. And that came together in an instant, in a 10-minute instant. So that is what the next big plan is Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm actually thinking, I mean, right now, with the polarization that's at this extreme point globally, and then to talk about this kind of healing with the specific examples you're bringing in, Lynn, oh my God. I mean, isn't this the tonic and the healing that's necessary?
Well, it's been so interesting for me to see, as I say, the effect on the participants, that oneness is really the key element. When we come into a state of oneness, we come into essentially an altered state where healing of every variety happens. And that's what's been so interesting to document, too, with the Power of 8 groups, to see both in them and the intention experiments, what they always talked about was essentially entering a mystical state. Abraham Maslow studied peak experiences toward the end of his life, a famous psychologist. And he talked about 5 different examples of what happens to people, and that most people have these qualities of, big physical changes, feeling of massive energy, real altered state, a blinding epiphany of meaning, those kinds of things. And my people, and again, I've documented it with thousands of people, feel all 5. They've entered some extraordinary altered state, what, A Course in Miracles called the holy instant, essentially a spiritual orgasm. And
Right.
It was just about coming together in oneness.
Yeah, well, of course, and isn't this perfect, having this conversation on Global Oneness Day? Because that's why it's Global Oneness Day, for you're expressing it so beautifully, why it's so important. And it's why this is the 10th anniversary year of Global Oneness Day, and it was created 10 years ago for precisely this reason that you're sharing. It's the first domino. When we can come into awareness that we're all one, everything, just all the other dominoes fall, and this whole planetary awakening that we talk about, and living into the unity of all of life, which is the most important thing, where the behavior change, where we're in our own homes and in communities and globally, that we're really living into this and creating a new style of living on the planet. So thank you for your decades of leadership in this area, Lynn. You've been marvelous. So we just have a minute here. Any just short, 30, 45 second call to action for people to live into the impulse of their own soul?
Well, the first thing that I think about is, first of all, find a group. One of the most powerful ways to transform your life, I found, is a Power of 8 group, a small group where you do intentions together. And one of the big elements of that group that makes it so powerful, as well as the intention experiments, is the power of altruism, of getting off of yourself. That will be the key. That is really what oneness is. And we have been told that we are supposed to be competitive. What I've discovered is just the opposite. We were born to connect. And that is, I've written about that in my book, The Bond. We were born to connect. We need belonging. And that gets expression in intention in a group. So that would be my bit of advice for people.
Yeah, that is perfect. And And that is, it's so true, getting off of ourself and into altruism, which is what we naturally do when we understand that we're all one, that we're actually like a red blood cell in the body of the earth, of humanity, carrying oxygen around to nurture the earth and humanity. It's what we naturally do when we understand that we're a part of the one. So Lynne, thank you. Wow, just so wonderful to have you here during this Impulse of the Soul panel.
Great, it's been my pleasure.
Now to Michael, Thomas, and Mathew, could you all each spend a minute or two just sharing your call to action here? We've set the table well as we talk about Impulse of the Soul and talking about what's the invisible and courage and faith, and then probably most powerful of all, your personal stories where you U-turned on huge opportunities to do the, I'll call it spiritual work that you're doing today and healing work. Can you, Michael, maybe start us a minute or two with your closing call to action and also a website where people can go to follow your work?
Sure. The website is agapelive.com, agapelive.com. And I'm particularly moved by this panel with Mathew and Thomas. It's just really filling me with a lot of buoyancy right now. And I'm really glad that I'm here with you guys. I'm just feeling a really deep connection, deep resonance with you. Everything that Mathew just said really hits home to me. I was thinking about, I was watching the news the other day, and I was shocked on NBC when a gentleman was doing a special on the fact that everyone's talking about healthcare, but no one's talking about why over 50% of the American people are sick. And he went on to talk about the fact that this was on broadcast television. The fact that most of the diseases were nutritionally based or are emanating from toxic environment that humanity is creating. And I'm listening to this newscaster talk, what we know, but it's generally not on the news at that level. And pointed out the fact that half the population was obese, many of them abusing drugs, but that 90% of these diseases came from nutrition or lack of nutrition. And I thought that was, again, as a sign that we're starting to wake up a little bit, if that kind of information is on the news. Again, everything that you said, Mathew, about the trees, about the diet, I've been a vegan for years, and myself, many years ago, after I had my awakening, I bit into a piece of chicken and I could feel the agony of the animal. So I stopped eating meat. And then after that, I discovered you didn't need animals to have protein. You could find other sources. And then I discovered about the climate change. And so for all three of those reasons, animals, the health of the body temple, and the health of planet Earth, I choose to eat that way. I don't invite people to radically change their diet, but I invite them to cut back. You don't have to eat as much until you find that you don't have to eat any. But I'm not out there, pushing it like you have to do this, but to consider not eating a meat a couple of times during the week. And if millions of people did that, it would make a mighty difference. In terms of a call to action, other than that, I always say that there's something for everyone to do. It takes courage because you're going to be talked about as soon as you break a habit and start to do something. No one is criticizing a couch potato. They're only criticizing people that are up and trying to do something, trying to shift the paradigm. We're not here to save the world. We're here to serve an emerging paradigm. And when you become involved in the emerging paradigm, you're going to be talked about, you're going to be criticized, you're going to be attacked, you're going to be persecuted in the name of the Christ, the name of excellence, the name of beauty. But do something that is about bringing in a world you want your children and grandchildren to live in. Think about that. And if you do, there's a bubbling kind of a joy that emerges that has nothing to do with circumstances. It's not a circumstantial joy. It's a joy because your soul is being heard and your soul is being expressed. So I just want to say thank you. I'm really getting a lot out of being with Thomas and Mathew today.
Yeah, truly an amazing, extraordinary panel. Yeah, thank you, Michael. And Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger, for people that are cutting over, what a great way to cut over. These are great meals and are stepping stones into Whole Foods. So shout out to these products.
Now they're selling it at Del Taco, Burger King, and all of these places. You can go in and get a plant-based meal at these regular stores now. It's a very interesting phenomenon we're watching.
Yes, and I personally think they taste a whole lot better than meat. But now a 1 minute shout out here, Thomas, from you, just your call to action in a minute and a website that people can go to follow your work, please.
Yeah, first of all, I want to strengthen what Michael said. I also feel it's such a joy to be here, and there's so much resonance that many things, you could repeat the same things again and again, but maybe two things to add to keep it brief. One is, I believe the power of our soul expresses itself in the human being through two forces. One is the drive to become, and one is the drive to belong. And I believe this means that what we talked earlier about, do I make some space? I call it, am I a gardener of space in my life? Like meditation is kind of allowing a spaciousness so that creativity can flow, that inspiration can come, and that I can listen to that which is usually more quiet than the noise of the world. I call it the whisper. So our inner guidance is usually need some inner attention to be listened to in order to be heard or felt. And I think when we listen to Michael and also to Mathew, there were beautiful examples what it means to listen to the drive of becoming. And then that's where we're going. That's where we feel joy when we follow that path. And the other one also is to create meaningful relations. I see our relational network, and I'm not talking about Facebook, our real relations where we relate to each other through our bodies, through our emotions, through our mind, through our spiritual activities, or the ritual that Mathew mentioned. We create depth and meaning, and I believe our social network is an extension of our immune system. So the more meaningful and healthy relations we build, the more healthy we also are in our own life. And one reason I believe why we are in the health crisis also that Michael spoke about is because we are focusing in too much on the individual when we are looking at health. So the context that we are living in is very important. I talked just before to Gabor Mate about the intersubjectivity of health and our neurobiology, that we are all connected through our nervous system, through our bodies. And that health has a collective dimension that we often forget. So how we create meaningful relations and how we follow the drive to become, I think is a good practice. And the website is www.thomashübl.com. Hübl is HUEBL.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Beautiful. And so Mathew, in 1 minute, your final call to action here and a website that people can go to follow your work.
Well, on Mother's Day this year, I launched a new program called Daily Meditations with Mathew Fox, and it's free. So you just sign up or just go to that www.dailymeditationswithmatthewfox. with Mathew Fox. And, I'm trying to lead people there through practices and reflections, meditations, on how we can be mystics and prophets today on behalf of Mother Earth. That's why we launched on Mother's Day, in honor of Mother Earth, but also of the Divine Feminine. Because I think a lot of the pathology that we're dealing with today, in our bodies, in our diets, in our education, in our politics and economics, a lot of it is traceable to patriarchy, to a view of the world that is one-sided, that is really very much built around the reptilian brain. I win, you lose. I conquer, you lose. I gather all the goodies, all the power and the money, and you don't matter. I just think that's that's part of the awakening today, the great gift of women's wisdom that is arising. Just on my daily meditations this morning, I think it was, this beautiful teaching from an Amazon woman leader in the Amazon about what's going on there and how the indigenous women are organizing today to speak deeper wisdom to the culture. And then I also talk about Greta Thunberg, this amazing teenager from Sweden who's become rightfully a real leader in the issue of global change today. And I just think that the rise of the young, I mean, the young are so vulnerable and so aware, many of them, about what's really happening to the earth today. So we need to listen to them and incorporate them. We need an intergenerational wisdom today. And that's another project I would invite people to, our Order of the Sacred Earth. We launched this a year or so ago, myself and two 20-somethings. Just look it up. It's orderofthesacredearth.org. But it's about a new kind of order that's not beholden to any religious tradition, but is open to any or none. And we take one vow together. I promise to be the best lover of Mother Earth and the best defender of Mother Earth that I can be. And I think the idea of an order, taking a vow together from people of all traditions and none, comes very close to what Thomas was just talking about, the power of relationship and of creating stronger relations today. And I think the whole idea of an order, an effective force to commit ourselves, that's what a vow is. It's a commitment. And it's a reminder then when we stray or when we run out of energy to gather. So I would recommend, I'd invite people to both of those websites, if you will. Take a good look at the Order of the Sacred Earth. We put a book out about it, the three of us, and then some other individuals we invited to write short essays about what it means for them. And I think it's a powerful idea today because a lot of people are living organized religion, but it doesn't mean they leave the need for belonging or the need for community or the need for group action. And I think that's what an order, and remember they have orders in the East as well as in the West. That's what an order has done historically. It's allowed people an alternative way to create a commitment together and to impact some of the issues today around the very deep topics we've been talking about together all morning, and that is how to bring spirituality alive, how to bring the soul alive, and to impact our culture from a deep place. So again, I want to thank you for this panel, which I've derived so much from being with Michael and Thomas, and your good questions, Steve.
Yeah. Thank you, Mathew. And that community sounds like a great community to look into and join for those that resonate with it, whether you're bringing in youth like that too. Wonderful. So thank you, Michael, Mathew, Lynn, and Thomas. This has been a truly extraordinary panel. I'm pretty sure I'm speaking for everybody here. Wow. I've really enjoyed my hour spent with you, and I know that others have also. I also want to thank all of those who are participating in Global Oneness Day and the hosts who've organized each of the panels this year. Thanks also to the Global Oneness Day speakers, all of them, the referral partners, and my partners and colleagues and humanities team who have been working year-round to create this program. This is our 10th year celebrating Global Oneness Day, and we've grown our number of registrations and viewers each year. Thank you to each of you for helping Global Oneness Day become our Earth Day for an awakened humanity. So as we begin to wrap up, I want to invite all of those participating in Global Oneness Day to follow the impulse of your soul. As this panel with Michael, Mathew, Lynn, and Thomas demonstrated, often takes great courage. But look at the reach and impact they're creating through their spiritual leadership. Let's all step up and out to the limit of our potential by following our soul's impulse each and every day. Let's live as our true self, as a part of the one in our soul space, our interior plane, where we are deeply in touch with our sacred relationship with the divine, each other, and the earth. We are interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. We are all one, emanations of the divine source. Certainly in today's world, we can see it's no longer a luxury to live this way. It is a necessity. We must step out beyond the illusion of separation that is causing so much dysfunction in the world. Perhaps this is the most important thing that we'll do in this lifetime. More is being asked of us. Spiritual and mystical literacy call to us. If we each embrace our spiritual practice and live in a being state of presence, we will find fulfillment in our own life and will be of great value to those around us. When we combine this with positivity and social activism, things that have been emphasized during this panel discussion, we come into our purpose, potential, and destiny. And this is the purpose of Global Oneness Day. I want to be sure to share this. Replays are available for free all the way through this coming weekend. And if you didn't take notes and would like to carefully review the panel discussion, you can order video links, MP3s, and digital transcripts on the upgrade page of the Global Oneness Day site. For a limited time, there is a $100 discount on that upgrade package. Also, Humanities Team has created a powerful and affordable set of programs to support you in living in oneness year-round. A Science of Self-Empowerment program with Gregg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Deborah Rozman, and Howard Martin is available, and a Final Frontier Journey to Mastery and Living program with Neale Donald Walsch are being offered with bonus packages that make these exceptional values. You'll also be invited to a Conscious Leadership free online events. We'll feature a program with Michael Bernard Beckwith here, Lynne McTaggart, Jean Houston, Gregg Braden, and many others. Be sure to keep an eye out for emails with these special offers. Also, you can learn more about all of these programs and download your free replays at globalonenesssummit.org. Before we begin our next panel, we're going to be silent for 10 seconds to center ourselves in oneness with the divine and each other. We call this a oneness moment. We're going to begin our oneness moment now.